Welcome to the BJJ Executive Podcast. I'm your host, Dave Kroll. Today's guest is Professor Ryan Young, one of the principal operators and instructors of the Kama Jiu-Jitsu network, founded by the legendary Rickson Gracie black belt and member of the famous Dirty Dozen, Master Dave Kama. Professor Young is a third-degree black belt under Dave Kama himself and began his training in 1989 under Rickson Gracie in Hawaii. After moving to the States, Professor Young's lineage includes the original Gracie Academy in Torrance, California, with Horion Gracie and his other brothers, Rickson Gracie himself in West LA, and a list of legends too long to quote. It was a true honor to host this episode and hear some of the history and insights of this exceptional martial artist. As always, I want to express my sincere thanks to you for your time in this episode, and I truly hope you're able to use this to help you on your journey. Thank you for making me a part of that journey, and as always, welcome to mine. Enjoy the episode. So, Mr. Young, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
No, it's my pleasure. I after having, this little intro conversation that we had and just knowing about your background and whatnot, I'm somewhat embarrassed that I had never made my way over to introduce myself. But we're basically neighbors.
Yeah.
I mean, we're in this Flower Mound community. I mean, I could have been a couple hours away and still would have been worthwhile to come up and see you and hear what you're doing. So have to give a big shout out to one of your students, Mr. Mickey, for being the broker of the year, I guess, and hooking the two of us up.
Well, thanks for having me.
No, it's my pleasure.
Appreciate it.
Mickey and I were sitting there talking. It was at Jiu-Jitsu World Leagues, and he and I got ourselves into a conversation, and I don't remember how the podcast came up. I think I maybe had just recorded an episode or something like that, and I'm like, I got to get your guy on. And he's like, I'm going to make it happen. And he's like, oh, I'll just go talk to him right now. I'm like, well, hold on. Like, let's throttle back a little bit. We don't need to go too crazy here. You guys, he's coaching, you've got students and stuff that we're getting ready to compete. So I'm like, let's not distract him. That night though, he sends me a text. He's like, okay, here's his number. You can contact him, So, Mickey doesn't go lighthearted on anything.
No, it's all or none.
The intros.
That's how I am too.
Yeah, no. So you were, we sort of changed numbers and whatnot, and then I gave you a call, and it sounded like you were out training in California. So that's not home for you, I guess, but
not anymore.
It's kind of where the roots are at anyway, or at least part of them.
Yeah, well, that's where my master, Dave Kama, is.
Yeah.
And this past weekend, they were having a UFC party because Crone was in it. At the same time, Master Dave just turned 60. So one of our black belts there, who's his assistant, Professor Rickson. Okay. He had messaged me and said, hey, this is Sunday, and then the event was going to be Saturday. So, he says, hey, we're going to do Dave's birthday party on Saturday. Think you can come? I'm like, all right, let me clear my Saturday. I think Mickey might have covered my Saturday for me.
Oh, nice.
Actually.
Mickey's hitting on all cylinders.
Yeah. So I just got a ticket and flew in, and I taught a little mini seminar, what we call a Module 1 seminar, to our members. Basically, it was like a little semi-private because the school's not big at all. Yeah. I did that after the class on Saturday morning, and then that night, Dave's house barbecue, and Sunday morning, did another class with Dave, and then headed home. That's amazing. That's typically how we do it. I'll go back twice a year, typically, sometimes 3 in a year.
You got to fly into LA for that? I
fly into Orange County.
Oh, into Orange County. Okay, yeah. Cool. John Wayne. Nice. That's some God's country out there.
It's good. Although one time I did it was a nightmare because the flight was delayed out of Love Field, which is Dallas. It was delayed 8 hours.
Lovely. And that's
my mistake was not to let Mickey know that I was at the airport so he could make a call and hope to prioritize the flight. That doesn't really happen. That was a joke. Yeah. But yeah, so with Orange County. I don't know.
Knowing Mickey, who knows, man? He might just show up and start commandeering airplanes for you. He has a strong will.
With Orange County, though, the problem was that they closed the airport off to air traffic at about 10 p.m. local time. And by the time they put us on the plane in Dallas, we wouldn't have gotten in until 11. So they actually got us on the plane and then to tell us all the flights canceled. So Yeah, but luckily I was able to have them route me into Burbank. So I flew into Burbank instead.
Okay.
So I did get there, and that was actually for I think that was for Dave getting his 6th degree from Rickson.
Jeez, that's crazy.
Yeah, that was actually kind of a surprise when that happened. Because I had messaged Rickson. I've gotten back in touch with Rickson since about 2018, and I think I did a video of his daughter coming to stay with us for a week as well. Actually, about 10 days, and she taught our kids classes for us. But
here locally.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Man. I want to say it was like 2019 or 2020. No, 2019.
That's amazing. I did a terrible job of teeing all that up. I mean, it's hard to kind of intro things sometimes, and we've got a long road still, and I definitely want to get deep into that. But I mean, just so everybody, just to kind of provide a little bit of a preload. I mean, you grew up in Hawaii. You started your journey with Helson Gracie. Mm-hmm. Moved on to Rickson Gracie, to Dave Kama. I mean, in terms of some of the connective tissue between some of the origins of jiu-jitsu, as we would know it today anyway, I mean, it's amazing to have a resource like you in the area. And certainly the first time that we've had that kind of exposure on the podcast. So this is truly an honor and a treat to have you share some of that knowledge and give some of the history lesson.
Yeah, it wasn't intentional. It was just I have a very unique training history.
Yeah.
Having trained with 4 of Elio's sons.
That's crazy. Yeah.
I've also trained with Fabio Santos. He was my teacher for a while.
Okay.
Kenny Gabrielson, who was number 2 on the Dirty Dozen list.
Yeah, he's out in Denver now, if I'm not mistaken.
It's just outside Colorado Springs.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just over
at
at his house, I think about a year and a half ago.
Okay. Colorado's like one big Denver to me. That shows you how naive I am.
It's very nice there. It's beautiful. Yeah. But yeah, I was able to start and train with Helson while I was in college at UH. I think it was 89 is when I started.
Okay.
And a friend of mine actually told me, because I was looking for another martial art to do. I was doing that Kempo karate, but I didn't like punching boards and getting kicked in the leg and all that kind of stuff.
Okay. You're in good company there.
So a friend of mine says, Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. And I'm thinking, what the heck is Gracie Jiu-Jitsu? Right? In Hawaii, the martial arts are very traditional.
Oh, really?
Either, Chinese kung fu or Japanese judo, Japanese karate, aikido, that stuff. But but jiu-jitsu, Japanese word, Gracie, non-Japanese name.
Yeah, it doesn't tie together.
Yeah, and then I go, what's Gracie Jiu-Jitsu? He goes, it's jiu-jitsu from Brazil. And I'm like, what? Brazilians do jiu-jitsu? So I'm like, okay, right? And I noticed that as I walked around campus at UH, there were certain bulletin boards, and how people would put the flyers up with the little tabs you rip off, and Romanian and all that.
Like selling a car.
So they had one, somebody put one up for Helson, and it was just a sort of like a stick figure drawing, and it just said, learn the greatest martial art in the world.
That's crazy.
And I just passed by it. And then when that friend of mine mentioned Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, I recalled those signs. Mm-hmm. So I thought, okay, well, the next time I see a sign, I'll just call the number. Mm-hmm. Never did see a sign again. But what happened was I used to go hit Bobby McGee's every Friday night with my best friend at the time.
I'm assuming that's a local establishment.
It's a club. Yeah. And I see a guy standing at the bar wearing a T-shirt that says Gracie Jiu-Jitsu with the old triangle right in there, the old logo. Yeah. So I just tapped him on the shoulder, and he turned on, looked at me, and I just pointed to his back, and I said, is that you? He says, that's me. And I said, I want to learn your martial art. He said, okay, come down to University of Hawaii. It was the gymnastics room. He says, be there 6:30 on Monday. I said, okay. And that's what started off. I mean, first I got there a little early, and a black belt now, 2 black belts. One named Kofi Debra, he was a purple belt then, and the other was Scott Devine, who's a Helson black belt as well, and he's out on the East Coast, I think. They were both purple belts, and they were just rolling around the ground. And I walk in, and I'm like, what the heck is this? Mm-hmm. There's no movement. One was on top of the other, holding them down, trying to set something up, but I didn't know what he was doing, and I just thought, what is this, right? I'm thinking punch, kick, pin. I'm not thinking grappling and setting up chokes and arm bars and stuff, but I just thought, you know what? I'll just stay here. I'm here. And then that's when his junior instructor, Romulo Barros, who's now a black belt under Rickson, came in, ran the warm-ups. Helson popped in about 7 o'clock and pulled me aside and had me mount him and says, all right, he taught me the Americana, and he taught me the straight arm bar, and he taught me the choke. And I just thought it was the most uneasy thing, because he's showing me how to choke him, and he's saying, tighter, tighter, tighter. and I'm pulling with all my might on his neck, and I'm going, what? And he goes, tighter, tighter, tighter. And then he finally taps me. And then I'm like, what's that? He goes, that means to stop. I'm like, okay. But I thought, wow, this is crazy, right? But he's teaching me all this stuff. And I thought, wow, this is awesome. I can pop somebody's shoulder, I can pop somebody's elbow, and I can put him to sleep. And then after that, I joined back the class and then got to doing our hard drilling and sparring and stuff. And I promptly was mounted by somebody, and they did it to me. And I'm thinking, how do I do that to you? Right? And because I had to learn defense. I didn't know that. Right? But that was just the first thing he taught me. And then at that point, I'd get a hold of House, and then, do you do privates? And he says, oh, yeah, I teach out of my garage. So I started booking privates. So I had regular time, Tuesday, 4:30. Right after another black belts, black belt session is Todd Tanaka in Hawaii. And, he's a black belt now in their house as well, but he was a kid then. I didn't, know him at the time. And it was fun. I probably did from 89 to May 92 when I moved to California.
Man.
And did my first challenge match in his garage.
No kidding.
Yeah, I was a blue belt at the time, and made me fight this guy who was a black belt in judo and karate. And but Helson said, all right, he's only going to do jiu-jitsu. And I'm going, okay, what does that mean? Well, apparently it meant in Helson's mind that I'm not allowed to hit the guy. And I'm thinking, wait, he's allowed to hit me. I should be able to hit him. Mm-hmm. But no, it actually turned out really good. Clinch, takedown, got on top, and subdued him twice because Helson gave another chance, telling the guy that I got lucky.
Yeah.
And, all the while knowing that, jiu-jitsu back then was kind of like a superpower because nobody knew it.
Yeah, right. There's no TV either, like as widespread as it is now. I mean, it's amazing how, I wouldn't use the term like household words, but I mean, seemingly average people have developed quite the vocabulary on just UFC terminology. Like, for example, the mount, or he's in his guard. Like, what do you know about that? I'm like, not in a condescending way, but just like, it's just surprising to me to hear how some people describe these things. And I'm sure it wasn't like that back then.
No, I mean, one thing I'm really thankful for was that, and we were all hungry for information. We wanted to learn more about what this jiu-jitsu is that we're learning, about the family.
Yeah.
And at that time, the only thing that was really out for marketing purposes was Gracie Jiu-Jitsu in Action, the video that Orion put out. Yeah, and I had to go.
Was that readily available? I mean, could you find it, or?
Yeah, I found it actually at the
library. How would you even know about it?
Well, I was told about it.
Okay.
Before I found Helson, that friend of mine said, go to Sinclair Library, which is one of the 2 libraries at University of Hawaii campus. Uh-huh. And there's a video in there, you can borrow it. So I just went and borrowed the video, and I watched it. And I wasn't too excited watching that first Elio and Kato match. But then when the next part after that, where they showed them fighting the karate studio, on the concrete with the mats all up on the side, and that's where Horian was fighting, Halls was fighting, Helson fought. And then they had that one 14-year-old kid or 13-year-old kid who choked out the other one. After seeing that, I go, okay, this is what I need to learn.
Get something here.
And after I met Helson, I went back to watch the video, and that was when Helson was in there. And Helson, he's got some violence in his jiu-jitsu. Mm-hmm. And it turns out I'm happy I learned from him first, because what that did is it got my mindset in motion, and I've never shaken it since. I still think of jiu-jitsu as self-defense. It's not a sport.
Yeah.
You can make it sportive, but it's not a sport.
Yeah.
Whereas with a lot of schools today, jiu-jitsu is a sport that they call a martial art, when in fact, for a lot of people, it's not a martial art and they don't know it.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm kind of thankful that I went the path that I went. And when I moved to California, after I got out of college, I couldn't find a job doing what I wanted to do. So I really had to be in New York, Chicago, or San Francisco, being in financial services field.
Is that what you did at UH?
Yeah, I got my degree in finance, but my specialty was investments.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and there's no investment houses in Hawaii. There's like one money manager at the time, and the trust companies. But I didn't have any options there, so I had to move. And
is it still the case that way? I wonder if, like, with the flattening of the world and with the work from home, like, if you can go anywhere, I mean, like, why wouldn't people suddenly start putting it in amazing places? Why do you have to go to a kind of a dirt hole like New York?
Yeah, well, I think the thing is, with regard to what I did, so I was an analyst.
Okay.
I didn't go into the sell side, which is brokerage.
Okay.
That they have in Hawaii.
Okay.
But as far as being an analyst, portfolio manager and all that, there's no way that I could really learn it in Hawaii. And a lot of it is because of the hours. because
that makes sense. You got to be awake
during
when the
daylight, when the time change happens, then Honolulu is 6 hours behind New York.
Yeah.
And New York opens their markets at 9:30, which means your market's open in Hawaii at 3:30.
Yeah.
Right. And you can't function like that.
That's a good point. California is kind of that way too. I mean, even just the 2 or 3 hours, or 4 hours.
It ran me on permanent tiredness.
Yeah.
The whole time I was working, because I'd have to be in the office at 4 or 4:30 to catch the news cycle to see what stocks are moving.
Yeah.
For market open at 6:30, but then again, I'd be done work. The market closed at 1 p.m. and I'd be done by 2 or 3. But I'd be driving home. I'd be falling asleep on the wheel. And
yeah.
It was a horrible lifestyle, and I did it for about 15 years, and I just couldn't do it.
Yeah. And end of the rainbow. I can tell you, like, total sidebar, but I mean, I was on the opposite side of that. I worked for a portfolio company of a private equity group that was West Coast based, and we were East Coast. So we were Miami and they were West Coast. And I mean, talk about being abused. I mean, for them, obviously they've got the time zone advantage. So, a meeting at 5:30 for them was a meeting at 9:30 for us. So, let's all just live together. Yeah. I think that's the takeaway. What was it like growing up in Hawaii? I mean, obviously for us, we're here landlocked in Texas. I mean, it must be, you've got a beautiful view of Grapevine Lake, but I mean, that can't be what it's all about.
It's funny you asked that, because I don't even really like going back to Hawaii now.
Is that right? What part of Hawaii were you in?
So I grew up in a town called Ewa Beach,
Okay.
which is on what we call the leeward side of the island, which is the drier desert-like side of the island. It's actually if you look at Pearl Harbor, which goes as a half circle facing upside down, it's on the left side of the half circle.
Okay.
And Honolulu's on the other side of Pearl Harbor.
Okay.
So about 25 miles away, but small island, Oahu, that's where all the people live. About
Yeah.
1.2 million live on that little island. When I was there, about 800,000.
Okay.
So
Still quite populated. I mean,
growing up was very awesome living there.
Mm-hmm.
You could jump on a bus. If you're a kid, you can get everywhere in the island. There was nowhere that wasn't walking distance from a bus stop, or you could just jump on your bicycle and just ride it. And
yeah.
I lived in a sugarcane plantation area, so we got to hang out in there in the reservoirs. We'd jump our bikes in them and stuff. But
Was it safe? I mean, was it?
It wasn't dangerous.
It wasn't dangerous, yeah.
I mean,
That's a good way to describe where we are now. Like, I don't feel like it's dangerous. It might not be safe, but it's,
yeah. I mean, I did grow up in a lower income area, but the worst that could happen is get into a fist fight with somebody, or your bike gets stolen.
Yeah.
But that's really it. I mean, it
Yeah.
wasn't like dangerous, like you fear for your life kind of thing. It
Yeah.
wasn't anything like that. It was just a relatively poor area. But I was lucky in that I went to prep school and stayed in Honolulu. Mm-hmm. I was lucky in that my father was able to take care of that for me. So I did kind of have two sets of friends, my neighbors and my school friends.
and your schoolmates, yeah.
Yeah. I never.
Sounds like a tale of two worlds to a certain degree.
Yeah, and I never did go to a public school because my mom just didn't want me to, and she did everything she could to make sure that I didn't go to one, and I never knew any better. I mean, both my kids went to public school.
Yeah.
The first public school I ever went to was college, but K through 12 was all private school for me. But growing up in Hawaii, it's awesome. The weather's great. I used to go to the beach during my high school years during the day.
Yeah.
Because I'd get my free periods all lined up. I'd have 2-3 hours off, and friends of mine, we'd go off campus, grab lunch, grab a local plate lunch, and go to the beach and go hang out at the beach.
Yeah.
And
Were you a surfer?
No, I boogie boarded.
Okay.
So
Sometimes that seems harder. When I see people that can really pull that off, I'm like, dang, that's impressive.
it's just because I was afraid of the huge waves.
Yeah, I don't blame you.
And then but when I started jiu-jitsu, then all of a sudden I meet all these Brazilians.
Yeah.
And they'd come to Hawaii during the winter when the waves were big, and there were people that were boogie boarders, pro boogie boarders, hitting the North Shore. Which are giant waves.
Yeah, I've seen them. I've just never. I mean, I would be eaten alive out there.
It's funny because the waves for the big tournament happen with 20 feet or more.
It's crazy.
And people in California say, they might go, oh, 20 feet, that's big, but it's not as big as you're talking about. Well, no, it is, because Hawaiians measure waves differently than Californians. Californians measure the face. Hawaiians measure the back. So a 20-foot wave has a 40-foot face.
I see.
Whereas,
that's crazy.
Californians talk about a 20-footer, to Hawaiians, that's 10-footer.
Yeah. That's
it's still a big wave,
Yeah,
but it's not big enough to hold certain surfing contests that happen in the winter. But yeah, Hawaii was awesome. I loved Hawaii. I still have great friends there.
Yeah.
And I always have places to train when I go back there.
Mm-hmm.
And in a way, I wish I could go back, but I've already gotten my mindset into Texas, and I love Texas. I'm going to die in Texas.
Wow.
And we moved here early enough so that my kids could grow up here.
Yeah.
So both my kids are Texans now,
Mm-hmm.
and and it was intentional to get out of California. I lived in California 21 years, which is great as well. But Hawaii is different, so I would not raise my kids there now.
Yeah.
It's just all the places I went to are gone.
Yeah.
And it's a different experience. Now, would it be a bad experience? Probably not. But
yeah, somebody's Hawaii. I mean, it's today's Hawaii. It is what it is when you're growing up there. I mean, my hometown's kind of the same way. I mean, not a good or a bad thing. It's when I go back though, it's like, that memory is missing. Like in some of the best places that I ever spent any of my youth. Like I think about Okinawa. You met my wife. Like obviously we met in Okinawa, and so many formative things happened there. I mean, amazing island life. And I go back 20 years later and I'm like, oh, it's just different,
Mm-hmm.
like, I mean, I could create new memories and have a really good time. And the paradise aspect is still there, but like those good connective, sort of, things that defined it were a part of that time,
Yeah.
and it's just different, it's just different.
Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, I'm a creature of habit. And
Yeah.
once my habits get set, then I want to get back to it. So, like I mentioned, I was just in California, and, I go there on a Friday and I'm ready to come back on Sunday, which is when I always come back because I'm ready to get back into my routine.
Yeah. So I guess taking it back to jiu-jitsu, I mean, fortunately you picked a, tab off the little flyer, and met, one of the legends, right? I'm assuming that had some influence as you went into LA and kind of carried on with the jiu-jitsu journey. And
so that's actually a
did
funny
you have a
story.
hookup, or was it a hookup, or was it?
Well, no, I called Horian and I said, I'm one of Helson's students. I'm going to move in California. Where's a good place to live?
Yeah, I checked your video out from the library.
Yeah. Well, I had already visited the Gracie Academy during spring break
Talk
of
about
that
organic
year.
marketing, man. That's about as old school as it gets.
Yeah, it was. So I called Horian and I said, hey, just need to know where's a good place to live because LA's big. And
Yeah.
he told me, well, I live in Torrance. And then when I got there, I realized I couldn't afford Torrance because it's a very upscale neighborhood. And his students in Torrance. So my thing was, okay, I work in downtown LA and Gracie Academy is in Torrance. So I need to find someplace that's as close to either one as I can. So I ended up living in this area called Harbor Gateway. And those who know Southern California know it's kind of I wouldn't say it's a ghetto. It's more like a barrio. And, I lived right by where the 204 Street gang is.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, I didn't know that until I saw, on the map, the little star on Fox 8 News, I think it was, and I go, holy smokes, that's my building.
Where I live. That's crazy.
So broke the lease and got out and moved up the street to Gardena, which is still not good, but it was in an enclave that was very nice. So we lived there for a year until my wife went back to college, and then we moved out to an area called Hacienda Heights.
I mean, was this the launch of your career, I guess? I mean, your career in financial services?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we moved there for me.
Yeah.
Right. And and as far as training, I called Helson and I said and I noticed that the prices in Torrance were much higher than what I paid in Hawaii. The price for 2 classes a week in Torrance were the same as what I paid for my monthly and my private.
Oh, is that right?
Actually, no, private paid a little bit more, but it was significantly more. So I called Helson and I said, I need a place to train, and what do I do? And he says, well, you can go to any of my brothers. So that would be either Horian, Hoyce, who were in the same spot, and Rickson, who had left, and I didn't know he had left. He says, you can train with any of my brothers, but if you train with anybody else, I disown you.
Damn. Fair enough.
Yeah.
I mean, this is different time,
Yeah, well, and with him.
Who else would there be? I mean, this is 92. Oh, the Machados. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So that would have been off limits then, huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and especially at that time, that was when I guess Chuck Norris and Horian had the falling out.
I didn't know there was a
if not
falling
for
out.
Chuck Norris, Horian and Gracie probably wouldn't have been in the U.S. in the first place.
Okay.
But, Horian did.
I saw like the Mel Gibson stuff. I didn't know there was any Chuck Norris connection at all, to be honest. That might be just naivete on my part.
Well, I think Chuck Norris might have made some great introductions to Horian.
Okay,
Horian did choreograph that fight scene you're talking about.
Okay.
The Gary Busey one.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, it was just, that was when, for whatever reason, there was some angst between the Machados and Horian, and one of it had to do with Chuck in a magazine article telling them that the Machados were the Gracie family champion.
And I see.
I still remember that conversation. I had
a bit of a faux pas. I mean,
yeah, they said Higgin was, and he kind of was. I mean, he was a champion of their family.
Mm-hmm.
But Helson tells me, he calls me and he says, "Hey, I kind of thought Rickson was the champion of the family. Well, if Higgin is a champion, then I want to go and fight for the championship now." Helson said that. So he told Hoist, tell Higgin I'm flying up. I'm going to fight for the championship. And then it got all smoothed over. Hoist went and smoothed it over with him. And but it was funny because, before social media and all that, I could actually just ask them questions directly, right? I talked to Helson, spent a lot of time together because we were drinking buddies, right? And I'd go to his house and he'd have barbecue up and we'd just sit and eat and just talk. I saw Hoist every day. I saw Horian every day. Saw Fabio Santos every day because Fabio Santos was in the Gracie Academy at the time before he moved to San Diego. I didn't see Rickson all that much until a few months later. They'd kind of never tell me where Rickson would be. He comes in every once in a while, and then finally I was able to find him somehow, some way, and ended up going over. I was training both places, Rickson's and Gracie Academy, and then after about a year of that, then it kind of got to where they decided it's time to split everything up. So we had to choose.
Gotcha.
So, and I met Dave Kama at the Gracie Academy. He's one of the garage guys in California, just like I was one in Hawaii.
And when you say the garage guys, this is part of the original crew that was training out of Horian's garage?
Correct. Before there was a Gracie Academy location, right? They were training, if I recall right, they were training out of 3 houses.
Okay.
Horian's house, where he and Hoist taught, and then the Machados had their house, and Rickson had his house.
Gotcha.
So all the lessons would run through Horian, and he would just kind of coordinate. So, okay, you go here today, you go there tomorrow, your class at this time. And, if I remember right from what Horian said when I interviewed him, he was managing 632 privates a month.
Okay. I'm just doing the math in my head.
Yeah, 30-minute sessions.
Damn, that's crazy.
Yeah.
That's
Even
crazy.
Helson told me
about managing white space on your calendar. That's nuts.
Yeah.
Imagine the modern day HOA. 632 cars pulling up into your driveway.
Yeah.
My neighborhood would go crazy, man. They would freak out.
Yeah.
I think that sort of cardons me off into a lease. Not that I would ever have 632 privates to concern myself with.
But that's the only way they taught jiu-jitsu back then.
Yeah.
There were no group classes then.
Gosh, that's crazy.
From what I understand, I think Carson Sr. had group classes in his academy because he taught a lot of the favela kids. They had no money. So he had to find a way to teach them and make the most of his time rather than the traditional Gracie Umaita at the time, I think was just privates only.
Is that right?
That's why it was.
Why do you think that is? Obviously I understand how beneficial privates could be, but also having other training partners is beneficial as well.
Yeah, so
other white belts, other body types,
I was lucky to learn both in privates and groups at the same time.
Okay.
And but Helson did privates 12 hours a day, six days a week.
Is that right?
Just 30 minutes back to back to back to back.
Man, that's crazy.
Yeah.
That's crazy. I guess it's partially crazy that one, you could be as efficient with your schedule as that, and then two, that 24 people a day would pop in for privates. That's amazing. Yeah,
he'd start at 6 a.m. and he'd be done at 6 p.m. And that's why he'd always come late to the group classes, because he had to finish his privates.
That's amazing.
But, he started off digging ditches when he first moved to Hawaii.
Maybe you can't even share this, but I'm just out of curiosity, what would have brought Helson Gracie to Hawaii? It's so, first of all, he's from Brazil. What? Is there a lot of Brazilians in Hawaii to begin with, or is it just? Well,
at the time, it was more of a seasonal thing because of surfing.
So surfing has a connection. Okay.
Yeah, because of the different hemispheres, right? So Brazil has their big wave season different time than we do.
Wouldn't have even connected.
So a lot of them would follow the waves and the weather. And Helson started, I guess he started in the garage, in Horian's garage. And then somehow, some way moved up to Monterey, taught there. And then Carlos Valenti, as some people call Cao, C-A-O. Valenti ended up in Hawaii and said, Helson, come to Hawaii.
Check this out.
So he created the venue for Helson to come to Hawaii, and Helson just never left.
Okay, cool. I mean, he's in good company. I know there's a lot of people that are like that.
But in the beginning, you can only teach a handful of people. But as time, that's why he was having to dig ditches to pay his bills.
Gotcha.
And then eventually just transitioned over to jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, it became stable enough.
Yeah, and I was the Gracie Academy when the UFC happened.
Okay.
So I was already, watching Hoy's prep for all that and stuff. But, I talked.
Must have been crazy because you've got like already an insider's view on this. I mean, for most of America, that came as a shockwave.
Yeah.
What was it like as sort of an insider knowing what's about to break loose?
Yeah, well, I'd watch the UFC with friends of mine and, over at their house or whatever. And they'd say, especially the Dan Severn one. And they said, that Hoist is getting his ass beat. And I said, no.
Yeah,
not at all. And sure enough, I guess I remember when Hoist hooked the triangle up on him. I said, "Yeah." I go, "Severn is done," and then the cable went out, and it's because they didn't have time limits on the matches, so they only could buy so much in cable time. And then what happened was it literally cut off. And when it did cut off, then it's like, oh, shoot, it's still going on. So about a minute later or something, they were able to get it back on. And when they did get it back on, that's when you see Severn slapping the mat. He was tapping out, but you didn't see up until that point, I guess. But I knew it was happening. I said, oh, yeah, it's over. And it cut off. And my friend's like, oh, what happened? And it came back on. And they go, he won? I go, I told you he would win.
You just seen it enough at that point.
And once that triangle went on, and knowing Hoist, Hoist with his long, skinny legs, he'd set triangles up on anybody, anytime. I go, yeah, it's over. There's no way Severn getting out of this. And sure enough, but yeah, I was in the thick of all that, which was pretty cool.
That's crazy. Yeah. Talk about a unique experience. I mean, we still, I shouldn't say still, but like when I first started, and I've told the story on the podcast, I mean, I first became exposed to jiu-jitsu through the military, and we started a program that used jiu-jitsu as part of the foundation for it. Obviously, it's a lot different. You have weapons, you have body armor, you have different, elements, I suppose, as a part of your training that need to be considered. But in order to sort of get through the basics, we would rent those VHS tapes, and we'd sit there and rewind, fast forward, rewind, fast forward, it's just a different time, But anyway, that was 10 years after, all that stuff took place. So,
and that's how a lot of us had to learn, because, we'd see how good, Helson was in class. And then Rickson came to visit us one time, and he came in on, let's say, a Friday night. And it was during the summer, so it was really hot. And then it was a 3-hour difference between California and Hawaii. And Rickson didn't get into our studio until about 8:30 that night. And he trained with everybody. We had a big class that day, probably had about 30 guys, and he ran through everybody twice.
Really?
Yeah. He was sweating bullets, and he was breathing hard, and I'm just thinking to myself, man, by then it was about 9:30. I go, man, it's like midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning your time, and you're still having enough. I thought I could get one up on him, right? Rickson, I tapped, he let go, and I went after him again, and he just laughed, and he tapped me again and said, next, right? But he just ran through everybody, and Hoist did the same thing when he came in, just ran through everybody like that. And I just thought, man, how are these guys doing this?
Yeah.
Right? How is Rickson able to get out of a rear naked choke? How was he able to get out of an armbar? So we always thought there were secrets.
Yeah.
What's the secret? So that's where all these videotapes that would come up from Brazil, we'd watch competitions and all that, and we just watch them. And I still remember one of the videotapes I watched, actually two of them. One was Elio Soneca, who's out in the Louisville area now. He's
Louisville, jeez.
Kentucky? An old Baja Gracie black belt, back before they were Gracie Baja. And, he's old. He's probably my age, 50s. Little guy. And he always went up against Royler, and Royler would always get him in the end. But he had this omoplata that just rips your shoulder out. It's bad. But I watched his tape, and the other one was I watched Nino Schembri, just playing with people. And I just watched him do that gogoplata and all that, which is funny. When I watch all these 10th Planet guys, I don't know if you know that it came from somewhere prior.
Yeah.
And he was really good at using it on people. I remember it was Nino and Margarita were two guys I had the most fun watching. And but yeah, that's we'd watch tapes, And okay, now what's he doing? What's he doing? You know, and it wasn't as collaborative then as it is now. Right now, it's like, what'd you get me with? Here, let me show you.
Yeah.
Whereas before, it's what'd you get me with? I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Right? We talked about this earlier. You know, so then be, okay, you want to play like that, huh? Right? I'm going to watch my videos now. I'm going to see what I can get. I'm going to slap it on you and see how you like that. And then you'd get him, and then he'd go, what was that? I don't know. I just got you. Or you'd look at me like, haha, I got something on you now.
Yeah, right.
But that's how it was. It was not collaborative. And I think because of that, sometimes I don't think we learned as quickly and efficiently as some of us do today.
Yeah.
Right. So, yeah, but with them, you never questioned what they taught you. You just took what they taught you. Now, in their mind, I know the more time you spend with them, they know in their mind what you need to learn next.
Yeah.
But they were never really good about explaining to you what you're going to learn next and why. And why I'm not teaching you that. It's just, here's what you're going to do. Here's what you're going to do. Well, what about this? I'll show you later. It wasn't, you're not ready for it, but when you are, so like I tell my students, I go, you're not ready for it, but trust me, I will teach it to you when you're ready.
Yeah.
And I am watching. So I know when you're ready for it. I know what you're not ready for.
Yeah.
Because like that day I mentioned when Helson showed me how to choke somebody from the mount and armbar and Americana.
Yeah. It's a pretty deep lesson. I mean, for day one.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Yeah.
Right? He taught it to me. But the thing I realized is that when people teach offense at the very beginning, they're teaching you candy.
Yeah.
You're not going to be able to use it. Like I said, I
sure.
wasn't able to use it. I wasn't able to use it for months because I could never get on top of people because I didn't know how to get out. So when we teach defense first.
Yeah.
We don't teach offense until you've been in for a while.
Yeah.
But it's not because I'm trying to hold it back. It's because it's going to be a waste of your time.
Yeah.
If you can't get to the position, what good is the offense?
Right.
So let me teach you how to get to the position first, and however long that takes you, then we'll add the offense in, and then we'll work on how to keep the position and stuff. But, you know, trying to get out from under. You know, at that time, I was 125, 130 pounds. And, you know, everybody in Hawaii is small. I mean, I think an average gi size in Hawaii is probably a big A1 or an A2. Right? Whereas here in Texas, A3, A4.
Yeah.
Right? Giants.
Yeah.
Right. And
I never would have put that stereotype with Hawaiians. Like, I feel like almost all of my Hawaiian friends are like linebackers. I mean, we've got a Hawaiian at our school that dude is huge. He's a good 270. And
maybe now.
Yeah. Maybe there's something different in the, I don't know,
but
in the pork or who knows.
You know, half the people in Hawaii have some kind of Asian descent in there.
Well, yeah. I mean, that makes sense.
Right. So if that's the case, you know, Caucasians are in the minority there. Right. Whereas all the mixed bloods are all, you know, and you know, the non-Europeans, they're the majority there. Yeah. It's different. So, like I said, small gis, small people.
Yeah, right. Lends itself perfectly to
jiu-jitsu. It was unusual. So I mentioned Scott Devine earlier. Scott Devine was, he was one of the big guys in the school, right? And he was probably about 210, 220.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, he was one of the one or two biggest guys in the academy.
Yeah. I mean, 210, 220 is a big guy, but I mean, like,
that's an average guy.
That's
in
an
my
average
studio.
guy, right? Yeah, exactly. I mean, I was 208 this weekend, you know, exactly. On purpose.
And you're an A3.
Yeah, I'm an A3. Yeah, exactly.
You could be an A2L, but, you know.
Yeah, could be.
Still, that's average here in Texas.
It's average, yeah.
Right? Whereas I hardly, you know, I don't keep a big stock of A1 gis. You know, it's my A3s and A4s run out the quickest.
No, that makes sense. That makes perfect sense.
Right? So I had to learn my defense.
Yeah.
And just get out.
Yeah. When I first started, that was like I had the luxury of doing privates. So like almost all of Blue Belt was private at the Valente Brothers, and it was the same way. It was like, look, you could ask a question, you know, like, hey, look, I got, you know, guy got me in this the other night. Like, what was that? You know, and, you know, inevitably there's some discussion around offense in it, but like, you know, it was more fundamental. Like, we're going to work on your mount escape. We're going to work on your side control escapes and whatnot. And it was them attacking and learning how to defend that. And when it came time to learn how to do the attacks, understanding how the defense worked was like just infinitely more profound than like throwing a bunch of stuff at somebody that's just wiggling their way out in a, you know, a mysterious manner. You know, worked for me anyway. I mean, that really helped my learning style, and it's interesting to kind of hear it tie back to the roots that actually has some, I guess, fundamental premise to it as well.
Well, you have to also realize that my learning, just like yours over at the Valentes, jiu-jitsu is self-defense.
Yeah,
it's not a
100%.
sport,
100%.
Right? Everything is, how would it be if this guy's trying to hurt you?
Yeah.
So, learning the defense and how to get out of stuff was, in retrospect, I should have spent more time on it rather than learning how to armbar people and all that. It just, I just need to get out of stuff, because once, like you just mentioned, once you know how to get out of stuff, you can deconstruct the offense.
Yeah.
At least how to hold the position, because you know what your opponent's going to need to get out.
Yeah.
And, when students would ask me, well, I'm learning all the defense, but when I get on top, I'm lost. I'm like, okay, well, shouldn't I learn how to submit people? I go, you will. I go, but I need you to work more on your defense because it's not quite where I want it. Well, but what if I get into a fight? Okay, then you get into a fight. You'll be fine. Well, when I get on top, I won't be able to submit them. I said, is this a fight or sport? They said, it's a fight. I said, okay, it's a fight. You hit them.
Yeah, you're on
right?
top. That's a good thing.
Right? Now, if it's a sport, you're training with your buddies and stuff, or you're in a tournament, you're not going to hit them. Then you're going to have to know how to submit them. I go, but for the self-defense portion of it, you just got to know how to hit them. Yeah. Hit them and get away.
Yeah.
So, that's
a real struggle. That is a real struggle. We had that conversation earlier, and I don't know if that's going to be something that shifts in my mindset over time. I mean, coming up in a self-defense environment, I really appreciate that. Like, it started with the military, and then, the Valenti brothers were strictly self-defense. Like, you have got a real open mind about it. I mean, you coach your students in competition, which means that, they need to, acclimatize themselves in some way to a rule set. Valentis were like, no, that's off the table. The consequence of that was that there was a side of jiu-jitsu that I actually really enjoy right now that I was never exposed to, and I don't know if that's a good thing or if it's a bad thing. Like, for example, this is probably going to be against your religion for me to even say this, but I never learned deep half. That's a horrible position to be in, at least to hang out in, from a self-defense perspective, obviously, because, your whole freaking head is like, it's eye gouge, fish hook. You bite your ear off. There's so many different things that could happen right there, but there is a very, 100%, there's a very sportive element to it, that, not to go too far off on a side tangent here, but how do you reconcile that? You've got people that do both, right? And would you just say, hey, look, just avoid those types of inferior positions forever, or?
So I wouldn't say it's in an inferior position.
Okay.
There's a lot of effectiveness to a lot of positions, but what we do is we kind of run things through a screen.
Okay.
Right. And if it's a concept that will not help you in a fight, meaning if you were to instinctively go to it and then that would then create punishment for you, then it passes through the screen.
Okay.
However, if it's something that from that position you can defend yourself if the person decides to escalate, right? And not that it happens, but I always tell them, because it used to happen back when I used to train, if I'd go visit another place, and then next thing you know, if I'm doing well, if I'm not doing well, then everything's good. But if I'm doing well against another opponent and he thinks that he should be beating me, then it would escalate. And what I always tell my students is this: you need to be ready for that escalation. And it's never gone to the point where they would escalate to start hitting me. But if it did, I'd be ready.
Yeah.
And that's all I tell my students is that I need you to have in your central nervous system, when you're fighting for your life, I need you to do the correct thing.
Yeah.
Right. And deep half is definitely not one of them. Right. So what we do is we run it through that screen. Okay, it'll work in a competition because the guy's not trying to elbow your face.
Right.
But in a fight, it wouldn't work. So because I'm all about that thought process about you fight how you train.
Yeah.
We don't train that way.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right. We just find an alternative.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. You're not going to have that, but you'll have something else. So let's figure the way out. And often we do have if you can't do this, then you do this instead. And here's why.
Yeah.
Right. Then if I decide to change my mind and hit you instead, you'll be able to defend yourself.
Yeah. It seems like a lot of those too. You can, like almost anything, you could take things to the extreme. The inferiority of a deep half, for example, and not passing through those filters. There's also a transitory moment in time there where you could use it to sort of, perform a sweep or whatnot. That's different than just sort of sitting there playing with somebody's lapel, right? So I guess there's probably different ways that, somebody could maybe view the position. And
yeah. So the common line that I tell my students is this: when you're deep into purple belt, then you can start messing around with different stuff.
Okay.
Right. I never tell them they cannot learn it. I just tell them, let's do it a different time.
Yeah.
Right.
That's cool.
For now,
That's cool.
need all your instincts to be where you're going to defend yourself with a good guard, not with a sit-up guard. That'll get you kicked in the face.
Right.
Not where you can get hit. Or at least be a point where if you can get hit, you can at least protect yourself.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why we had mentioned earlier why I don't teach half guard to my white belts. It's because of that Randy Couture, right?
Okay, you got to tell me this story.
Well, I can't remember who it was. Maybe one of his early fights. No, I don't think it was his first fight, but one of his earlier fights where one of these sport BJJ guys now makes a transition into MMA, and they're still doing sport concepts.
Okay.
Right? So they go and play half guard on Randy. Randy just goes and sits on the leg and pins it and just starts throwing blows at the guy.
Yeah.
And you can't get out of it. You got the wrong leg. You're it works in a sport tournament because the guy can't hit you. But if he pins your leg and keeps you from shrimping out and he just starts pummeling your face, you're going to be done.
Yeah, that could be a problem for sure.
So, like I said, when their white belts are all about their defense and protecting themselves, we run through self-defense early on, just like the way you did. We do both self-defense, the standing up stuff, as well as the ground stuff. But the ground stuff is always geared toward fighting.
Okay.
Now, we don't teach it in a way like other places where they teach you to fight against non-trained opponents.
Okay.
The reason is because if you're going to fight with somebody who's non-trained, that's one thing. But if you end up in a fight with somebody who is trained, you could be in huge trouble.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that.
So when we teach the white belts, it's from a perspective that the guy that you fight with knows how to fight.
Okay.
Right. So you always assume he knows how to fight. And if he doesn't know how to fight, oh, okay, that's a little bit of an easier surprise for you.
Yeah.
But if he knows how to fight and he escalates it, then you're able to successfully deal with it, or at least the best that you possibly could.
Yeah.
Versus not knowing a clue and getting stomped on or getting your an elbow dropped in your face, whatever, because you willingly go to guard.
Yeah.
Right? Guard is not a position that you willingly go to in a fight. Right. In a sport, yeah, you could.
Yeah.
But if you're trying to win, then we are going to work on our guard and how good our guard is. But we're not going to pull guard. That's something we don't. Because in a fight, that's not what you're going to do.
Yeah.
You always want to be on top.
Yeah. The guy that was, I was telling you when you got in here, I just put an episode out today, and it was with Zach Paul, who's he got a very similar mindset, and he made a comment like, it's all about whose buddies show up first. I don't know if you want to be flat on your back when the three guys around the corner pop in. And no, that's interesting. Like I always found a conflict there on the skilled, like training for an unskilled opponent. And was that something that came from Dave or from Rickson, or is that something that you incorporated where, like, some of the, for example, a big part of the self-defense curriculum that I came up with, like, it advances quickly, right? Where, you're obviously, you're grappling with other skilled opponents, right? If it's a purple belt versus a purple belt, like, that's already out the window. If it's blue versus blue even. But a lot of it was, surprise bear hug or those types of things, and, look, I'm in no position to even really opine on that, I suppose. But like, if that's your only exposure to jiu-jitsu and you walk out after 6 months of that, you could be in for a rude awakening really quickly if things even just move to step 2. Like, it's not like the thing I like about jiu-jitsu is it's progressive. there's a flow that goes with it, right? And it's not just like a kata move, like I just performed my move and it's over with, right? There's usually a step 2. Yeah. How did that come to be with, or like, maybe I just don't understand. Like,
well, you have to consider where I came from.
Okay.
Right. And with Rickson, it was all about a fight.
Okay.
And our oldest guys were probably early 30s.
Okay.
Everybody else
athletic
was
prime.
we're late teenagers and 20s.
That sounds horrifying to me. We've got a few guys. As you're setting the standard, right? But I'm starting to feel a little crusty. So I can. And
back then, you joined jiu-jitsu because you wanted to fight. You didn't want to get in shape.
Yeah.
You didn't want to learn sport. You wanted to fight. And that's all jiu-jitsu was about. And that's what Helson instilled in us. And then here's another example that's even more to what, how the thinking comes from all the Hawaii Helson guys, right? Because these are the ones that saw Helson day in and day out, every day. Is that there was one Brazilian student, and his name was Andre. And he didn't speak any English, very little English. He came in just to surf. So he had gone up to the North Shore to surf. And there's, at the time, I don't know if they're still there, but there's kind of like a beach mafia there. And they would, if you're in their area, then, people fight over
like some
surfing.
Regulators, I suppose. Or...
I guess. But, it's like people are, surfers are very territorial no matter where you go.
Yeah,
there's always going to be a fight over a wave. Okay.
I've heard that.
So there was this one instance where I guess Andre was surfing on the North Shore. Number one, these guys felt he didn't belong there because he's not a local. Number two, he's not one of them as a local. And number three, he might have stolen a wave. So they get to the shore, and this guy wants to fight him. And Andre doesn't speak any English, so he don't know what's going on. He can only go by gestures and stuff. And next thing you know, the guy attacks him. So they end up in Andre's guard, and Andre just neutralizes him, right? Because he knew how. He didn't take the fight up or anything. He just neutralized him. Well, that night in class, I'm sitting next to another practitioner who's from Brazil. And I hear Helson and Andre talking in Portuguese, and I hear Helson yelling at him in Portuguese, and I see him, he looks very animated. So I go, what's going on? He goes, looks like Andre got into a fight on the North Shore. And I go, did he beat the guy? He goes, no, looks like he just neutralized him. So Helson is telling him, you need to do this, 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 and this. The guy was a blue belt. He says, this, this, and this. And then Andre goes, okay. And Helson goes, no, you go back there tomorrow and tell me what happens. So Andre went right back up. Ended up fighting with the guy and beat him up. So that next Wednesday, when class happened, you see Helson and him talking, and you see Helson all of a sudden so happy, patting him on the back, and he's going, hold on. He runs over to his bag, grabs a tape out, and puts a stripe on his belt for that.
Okay.
So you look at all the other students were looking at that, and we already knew what happened, right? We knew that Andre went back and beat the guy up. So people are thinking, oh, is that how we get love from Helson?
Yeah.
Get into a fight. So guess what? A lot of times you'd have students then going out to clubs and picking fights and right and just fighting. That just kind of, and I wasn't. I just that wasn't my jam.
Yeah.
Right? I wasn't into picking fights. I've been in several growing up in Hawaii. That's kind of a way of life, especially when you grow up in the area that I grew up in. But I never went to go picking fights. That just wasn't me. But that's what they would do. Because that's what Helson seemed to want.
Makes
so that's
sense.
the culture that got bred there.
Okay.
Now, when I moved to California, I'm at the Gracie Academy, completely different.
Okay.
All professionals there.
Okay.
People that were dentists and doctors and teachers.
Yeah.
And then you had...
and Torrance, I guess.
Yeah.
It's a different animal.
Well, and you had John Milius, right, who's a movie producer, who's there, right? And, and then Al Bundy, right?
Right.
His name is.
I can't either.
But that's kind of students that they
infamous
had over
beginners.
there. They had all types of students, but that was what you saw. That's what I saw in Gracie Academy, right? Where I'm used to fighting hard, and they're going, why are you fighting so hard? And I'm thinking, why are you not?
Yeah.
Right? Aren't we here to learn to fight?
Yeah.
What they weren't. I mean, it's just a different mentality. So that's what I grew up with. And then... That's why when it was time, when I went to Rickson's, it was so easy for me to make that transition because Rickson was just like that.
Okay.
Helson's not as, he's fun, he's nice, but in a fight, you don't want to fight with Helson. He'll mess you up. Rickson will beat you up, but not with the intent and with the violence that Helson would give you.
Is that right?
Yeah. And I learned that from Hoist too. Hoist says, yeah, he goes, because I asked him, I go, who's better, Helson or Rickson? He said, and Hoist goes, are we talking about a jiu-jitsu match, or are we talking about a street fight where things are available?
And
I
weapons
said,
of opportunity.
Yeah. I said, outright street fight. He goes, Helson.
Yeah, Helson will pick up a cinder block.
Yeah, he would. I mean, and that's the way he was. I mean, Helson even told me a story about how he tried to stab Horian when they were teenagers.
Jeez.
This was at the ranch. And they had to eat in shifts, and there were so many people, right? Because they had all the, Carlos had like 21 kids,
yeah,
right?
Yeah,
and Elio had 10 kids, right? So then they kind of had to eat in shifts. And Helson was telling about this tin that came in with crackers in it, a big tin, right? It's like the size of a sparkless water bottle, the big one that they bring in, they drop on your water cooler.
Yeah,
it was that big, full of crackers. So he saw it and he grabbed it and he opened it, and Horian told him, no, you can't have that. That's for everybody for dinner time. And Helson goes, no, it's okay. I'm just going to have a few, right? Horian says, no, you can't have it. So he goes to grab the cookie tin away from Helson. Helson, he was sitting at the dinner table. He grabbed a butter knife, because that's the knife he had, and he tried to stab Horian.
Dang, that's crazy.
And I asked, I go, holy crap, you tried to stab your brother over crackers? He goes, well, yeah, I was hungry. And
talk about some primal instincts,
he was
man.
taking him away from me.
Yeah.
And I go, how old were you? He goes, 13. I go, how old was Horian? I think he said Horian was 15 or 16 at the time.
Okay.
Right? He goes, yeah, so I grabbed my knife and I tried to stab Horian in the stomach. And I go, what happened?
Jeez.
I go, what happened after that? He goes, yeah, Horian fucked me up.
Fair enough.
It was when he still could, I guess, right?
Yeah.
But that's the mentality that Helson brings in, you know, or the time that he was the guy who tried to pick a fight with him coming out of the ocean, and ended up fighting the guy in like a foot or two of water, and then, you know, slapped a rear naked choke on him, but didn't squeeze, and then took his head below the water and made the guy kind of panic a little bit, and he pulled him up. And he says, are you ready to stop? And the guy is screaming at him, so he pulls him back in the water. He said, I think he dipped him in the water 3-4 times. So finally the guy just screams, said, okay, I'm sorry. And then he's walking back onto the beach, and his friends go to him like, what the heck are you doing? You know? He goes, that guy took my wave, you know, because of that, you know, I wanted to kick his ass. And they go, well, you picked the wrong guy. You don't know who that is? I'm like, no, who's that? He goes, that's Helson Gracie. Don't mess with him. You know, and he goes, well, yeah, now you tell me, you know, that type of thing, right? Yeah. But, you know, that's the kind of stuff that, you know, students like me at the time, you know, we would eat those stories up. Yeah. You know, we just want to hear about everybody. You know, like that fight with Rickson, you know, fighting on the beach, you know, I saw the video of it at Helson's house. Really? Yeah. You know, it's just, it kind of got to be that way. Or I saw an old video of Hoyler fighting Eugenio Tadu, who was, he was one of those luta livre guys. Okay. Short, stocky bodybuilder looking dude. And he and Hoyler, they probably fought for like an hour straight. It's crazy. Until finally Eugenio just says, nah, I don't want to fight anymore. And then that's how it ended. You know, but that's the kind of stuff that we grew up watching and wanting to watch, you know. And that day that Rickson fought, what was his name? In his own studio. Anyway, the Japanese guy. Yeah, I was at Rickson's academy that day. I was going to ask you about that. I didn't know how to tee that up, but I wasn't sure what years that was. It happened in the studio. I want to say it was around. He brought like a press corps with him too, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, it was either 93 or 94, because I was working at that one company at that time, and Rickson used to have morning classes, and later when I started with him, it was only morning classes, and luckily at the money management firm I worked at, they had me doing some data work. I was a low guy on the totem pole, so I worked. Sounds like a blast. I worked the swing shift. I worked 3 to 11, right? Yeah. So I'd go and train at Rickson's in the mornings. So that was awesome. It worked out for me. Yeah. But then when we went back to the regular shift at work, then that was the day I'd come into the studio one day, my regular time, about 4:00, and Mauricio Costa and Limao, who is Luis Heredia, both black belts now, they were telling me about what happened. They go, oh, you missed what happened. And he told me the whole story, blow by blow. And I'm thinking, oh, man, I missed it. I was so upset that I missed it. It just happened like a few hours before I got to the academy. I'm thinking, shoot, man, had I known, I'd have for sure called in sick to see that. Heck yeah, man. Right? Because that's, you know. I'm going to have to look that up now. Dave's seen the video. Okay. But Rickson has a video at home. And that's where that fighter, the Japanese fighter, ended up in the hospital. He was in the hospital for 1 or 2 weeks, just dealing with the damage that Rickson gave him, because Rickson saw him as so disrespectful. Because Rickson was willing to fight him in pride, but the guy says, no, we're fighting here and now. So Rickson's like, okay. Yeah, and he brought his crew with him. And he brought a crew with him, but he had Limao lock them out, and so Mauricio was there, right there when the fight was happening, but he says he never seen Rickson so enraged. I mean, Rickson. He just mopped him across the floor. That's crazy. That's crazy. It was a beatdown, and he slapped that choke on, and would not let it go. Aside from what I mean, like the obvious litigious nature of the world today and social media and whatnot, why do you think that stuff doesn't happen anymore? I mean, is it the flattening of knowledge and how widespread and less mysterious, I suppose that is? I mean, these legacy-like stories, I mean, they're in our lifetime, like this isn't something out of a Japanese fairy tale. I mean, this is like, you lived it, Well, it's the same
It
reason.
seems so far-fetched now. I can't even imagine that story happening today.
To me, it's the same reason why karate dojos don't go and dojo storm each other.
Yeah.
They're doing the same thing.
Yeah. Right? I guess so.
Judo schools, they'll meet in a tournament. They're doing the same thing.
Yeah.
But back then, you just had Gracie Jiu-Jitsu and you had every other martial art. Mm-hmm. Now that Japanese guy who came in, I'm trying to think who it was. I still can't remember his name.
I'm going to look it up when you leave. I want to know now.
That Japanese fighter, when he came in, he was doing shoot wrestling. Which in Japan, a lot of it was staged as well. It was kind of like our WWE.
Is that right?
But they would actually hit each other, right? And it would be where, okay, you're going to lose this one. You're going to take some damage on the way, but you're going to lose this fight. So they were fixed, which is why a lot of people didn't want to fight in Japan because you don't know, is it fixed or is it not?
Yeah.
But, boy, I lost my train of thought. What was I talking about?
Well, like how, I think where you were going
Oh,
with it makes a
so
lot of sense.
as far as the challenges and all that, since everybody does jiu-jitsu now it's like, why do it? Doesn't matter anymore.
Right. Yeah.
There's no reason for challenge.
There's also a lot of outlets to essentially challenge people in real life too. There's competitions that are available.
The reason why they did the challenge was to show the students in the studio that was being stormed that there was another. If you were there for the martial aspect of it, there might be a better option.
Yeah.
Right. And Dave Kama, Hoist would take him along, and Dave would tell me how Hoist would go, hey, what are you doing right now? Nothing. At the studio. He goes, okay, well, we're going to go on a ride.
That's crazy.
And he said it happened a lot.
Is that right?
A lot of times.
Yeah.
And, there's one that the Gracie Academy actually put out on YouTube. It's called Gracie Challenge 5. And that was when Dave was doing a challenge match. Didn't know who the guy was.
Okay.
Hoist just told him, be here at this time. You're going to do a challenge match. And he said, okay. And he thought it was going to be a guy doing a different art, but not a guy who does all the Filipino martial arts and stuff. And this guy was athletic too. Mm-hmm. But yeah, Dave was a blue belt at that time.
Wow.
He told me he was the first non-black belt to do challenge matches.
Really?
For them.
That's a good segue into Dave. So you guys, you guys are close in age. You've come up over the years, obviously. I know he's a little bit older than you are. What was how did the timeline work? Obviously, you're carrying the flag now. It must mean a lot to you. So, how did that connection come to be?
So I met him in 92 when I moved to California, and he was still training at the Gracie Academy as well as at Rickson's at that time.
Okay.
And there were a number of people that were doing both.
Was he a beginner then?
He was a 4-stripe purple by the time.
4-stripe purple. Okay.
He started in 86.
Okay. Okay, cool.
And then Rickson moved to the U.S., I think, in 88 or 89, and then Dave was training with Rickson ever since. And he said he didn't even know that Rickson was the best one. He says they were all good. Yeah. But he learned later on that Rickson was the best, but it was probably already purple or brown belt by then. So that's when I met Dave at the Gracie Academy, and I just looked at him, and he looked at me, and we kind of looked at because we're both part Hawaiian, and it's kind of like,
got a little connection.
I think I might know you. Are you from Hawaii? He says, well, I was born in Hawaii, but I was actually raised in Sacramento. Okay. And but the first time I ever trained with him, he was a purple belt. I was like a 2-stripe blue belt. Just came in from Hawaii, and he just smashed me. Really? Yeah. It just tap, 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 tap. And after he tapped me, he'd let me go. He said, all right, keep going. So I'd go, and I'd walk into another trap. Tap. Okay, keep going. I'd go and I'd walk into another trap. And I'd never been destroyed to that degree by a purple belt before. Yeah. I've trained with purple belts many times, and they all beat me, right? But never got destroyed like that. And easily. And Rickson was teaching him all that connected stuff at that time. Yeah. And it was, and the pressure, right? People talk about pressure, pressure pass and all that. It's not pressure. Very, very few people have I come across to where it's so much pressure that you can't help but tap to the pressure. But yeah, Dave had just incredible pressure. And then that's how I met him. And then I kind of bumped into him when I went to Rickson's place. I bumped into him as well at the time. And Dave taught me. He didn't teach very many people. He said back then his whole thing was just, I'm going to beat you and that's it. I'm going to just bust you up. Okay. But he did it to me. And then he would say, here, Ryan, do this instead. I'm like, oh, okay. So I did it. And those few lessons that he gave me back then when he was a high purple or a low brown belt, I remember them for years. And when Rickson was fighting Japan, and Rickson wasn't teaching classes anymore, he was just training, then I ended up leaving. That's when I went over to Kenny Gabrielson's place. But I was looking for Dave, and I knew that Dave was still part of Rickson's team, but they just said, oh, he's down in Laguna Niguel. And I lived in L.A., and Laguna Niguel to L.A. is very far.
Is it?
Oh, yeah.
What's very far?
Well, it depends on if you have traffic. If you have traffic,
seems
easy,
like that's
hour and a
always the
half.
case. If with traffic, easy, an hour and a half. Okay.
Yeah, without
that's
traffic,
pretty big a
45 minutes to an hour.
Yeah, still. I mean,
So I never was able to make it there because I always worked really early, right? Because I worked market hours.
And this is his school that he opened, or what was?
No, so Rickson had 3 schools.
Okay,
Rickson had the main one on Pico Boulevard in West LA.
Sounds like the infamous one.
Yeah,
where
that is the famous one.
Yeah,
and then he also had one up in the north in Oxnard, and one in the south in Orange County in Laguna Niguel.
Okay,
so he opened all 3 of those, and he commuted to each one to teach.
Okay. Did any of the other guys, any of the other brothers have multiple schools like this, or was Rickson sort of the first to?
No, just Horian had the Gracie Academy. Hoist was there. Hoyler was there until March of 92.
Okay.
Or actually, no, maybe April of 92, because I visited there in March of 92, and that's where I met Hoyler for the first time. And when I got there in May, Hoyler was back in Brazil.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
He had left.
Okay.
So it was just Hoist and Horian there, and Rickson was gone. Although there was still an office on the door in the academy that said Professor Rickson.
Okay.
But he was never there.
Okay.
Right. And it turns out because he had found another location, and he had opened 3 different locations, but the full-time school was the Pico Boulevard one, whereas the other 2 were part-time. He was there just twice a week to each one.
Gotcha.
Eventually what happened was he passed Oxnard on to Chris Saunders, who was one of Rickson's 2 Dirty Dozen black belts. Chris Saunders and Dave Kama was the other one. And Dave took over Laguna Niguel. This was like 93, 94.
Okay.
And it continued on as Rickson Gracie Laguna Niguel. That's the longest Rickson Gracie Academy. All the way until around 2012, when Rickson...
2012,
yeah,
wow.
Dave was running it all that time.
Dang, that's crazy.
Yeah, and Dave never had
2012 is recent history. That's it's a decade ago. Yeah, it's 11 years ago, but still, from 94 to 2012.
Yeah, talk about someone who truly loves the art.
Yeah,
was Dave.
Okay.
Dave, the only money he collected was just from whoever was training, and he gave it to the club as rent. He never took any money. He didn't care about the money. And he never had more than, say, 5 students at any given time. And so I was teaching privates out of my garage as a brown belt. And that time I was under Brad Jackson, who is a half Gracie black belt in Southern Cal. But I was teaching out of my garage, and I had a student who was a friend of my wife's, and he says, I found Dave Kama. I'm like, you did? He goes, yeah. So he, Jason Selva, who's a black belt out in East LA, had a website, and he had found, I guess he was looking for all the Dirty Dozen guys. So he found Dave and took a class, took pictures and all that, and said where he was. So that's where my student said, hey, he's over there. So I ended up calling him. He wasn't there. He'd moved back to Laguna Niguel. So I went to Laguna Niguel, and that day I met up with Dave on his night teaching on Thursday night. There was nobody but he and I.
And what year is this?
This was 2008.
2008? Okay.
Yeah.
Man, some time has passed by then.
Yeah, so he looks at me. He goes, "Yeah, I know you." I'm like, "Yeah, I know you too." So, and we started training, and I was the one that showed up. And I go, "Does this happen a lot?" He goes, "It happens frequently." I go, "So what happens?" He goes, "I come in, I set the mats down, I disinfect the mats, and if nobody shows up, I wait 15, 20 minutes or so. Then I pack the mats up and I go."
Okay.
But he did that for years, right? He didn't just say, forget this, I'm done, or he didn't try to market it all. People would kind of find out about him through the grapevine. They'd go and train with him. And that's how I found out about him.
Yeah.
And that day, it was just he and I just training. And I've always known Dave to be the best Rickson black belt. Mm-hmm. And then, but, last I remember when I trained with him, say 10 years prior to that, 15 years prior, he just smashed me, right? So this time he and I are training, and I'm actually doing pretty well, right? Because here I am, I'm a brown belt now, and I'm doing all this stuff, making all this progress against him. I'm like, wow, either I got better or I thought he was better than he actually is. Well, so I ended up, getting some stuff on him and tapping him here, tapping him there, and he taps me here, taps me there. And then I realized later on, this was way, way later, once, after I got my black belt, he and I were training my garage one day. We trained in my garage every Sunday, and he puts his hands in his belt, and he says, all right, pass my guard. And he would slam me with his legs, slam my head down the mat next to him, and slam into his chest, and I could not even open his guard.
Really?
Yeah. And I'm a black belt by
Even
then.
with, I mean, your hands are available.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. He only handicapped himself. It's kind of stuff that Rickson would do too. So then later on, I go, what the heck was that? He goes, I just needed a me day.
Okay.
Yeah, that's his days when he's no longer trying to help you. He's just trying to help himself.
Yeah.
And that was the first time I experienced it. And then I realized, holy crap. I go, Dave, you've been messing with me all these years. He goes, no, not messing with you. And I said, but you let me catch you and all that. He says, well, it wasn't that I was letting you. So if you can imagine it, let's say I train at level 10 at my very best, and he's training at level 100. So he's got all that headroom above me from 11 to 100. Instead of him training at 100 and me training at 10, instead of us training at our best and him shitting on me every single moment of the match, like he did when I first met him, he would train at 11. And, he's trying to progress me, right? So he's training at 11, I'm training at 10. 10 is my best. But then I figure out one concept that he might have taught me that enables me to jump ahead of him to 12 and submit him.
Yeah.
So he goes, good, right? So in my mind, before that moment, I thought to myself, haha, I'm getting you.
Yeah.
Right? But I'm also thinking, you're 5 years older than me. There's probably some of that in there too. But then what would happen is once I get to 12, he would now go to 13.
I see.
Right. So he'd always take me up. So he did it without telling me he's doing it.
Yeah.
He'd make me think I earned the position when I really didn't. I mean, that's how good an actor he is when it comes to training and teaching. But he did progress me one step at a time. It took me 4 years as a brown belt. I came to him as a brown belt, and I didn't get my black belt for 4 years. My whole mindset was this: I am going there to learn everything he does. If I escape mount one way and he escapes mount a different way, I'm going to do it his way. I'm going to just learn it. And even if I can't get it, I'm still going to learn it. I'm going to do it, and I'll forget the way that I used to do it. So the one that we call elbow escape, we don't do that. We do one what's called hip escape.
Okay.
Right. And it's what Rickson had to kind of invent on the fly going up against Mark Schultz. Apparently, Mark Schultz got mounted on him and squeezed his legs together, and Rickson's elbow wouldn't go in there.
Okay.
Elbow escape didn't work. So that's when Rickson on the fly thought, what if I bang his hip, see what happens? And he was able to get out that way.
Okay.
So that's the escape that we do from the mount. Well, we do the UPA, but we also do the hip escape. We don't do the elbow escape. But, Dave is so old school. When he's teaching the hip escape, he's telling everybody elbow escape, even though his elbow's not doing anything.
Gotcha.
Right. So I always have to correct my students. All right, no, that's hip escape.
Would you only do a hip escape because it's so far superior to an elbow escape,
So if you imagine,
would you show the original elbow escape, or?
I don't show the original to my students.
Okay.
But when I go and teach, so I travel around, I teach a lot, and I go to a CTC, a Gracie University, Gracie
Certified
University.
Training
Yeah,
Center,
they're CTCs. Yeah.
Okay.
I know how they learned it,
Okay.
and I know exactly how their curriculum goes because I learned it as well.
Yeah.
But I also know the ones where Rickson says, no, do it this way.
Interesting. So it's been modified.
Oh, yeah. No, Rickson's Jiu-Jitsu is different.
Interesting. Very interesting.
And, and it's Dave just saying, no, here's the way you do it. And so there's kind of a running joke. So I opened my school, my location here. It's still Dave's school, actually. But I opened the location here in October 2013. So my first paying students came in 2014. So one of them was 14 and a half when he started with me, and he's like 23, 24 now. But there were times when he had gone to college, he went off to Oklahoma State and came back. And when he came back, he was training, and some of my newer students would look at that and go, why is he doing it that way? And I go, oh, don't worry, that's just Kama Jiu-Jitsu 2014. Because Dave would come in, and after meeting with Rickson would say, well, do it this way instead. So then Dave would then bring it back to the Irvine students and bring it over here, because he comes here once a month. And he'd say, yeah, this is what we're going to work on today. And you know how we used to always do it this way now. And it's not a matter of substituting one is better than the other. Sometimes it's the first version of it gets you to 95%. But you always have those 5% that you still can't get with it. It doesn't work. And you think it has to work, but for some reason it doesn't work. Well, now we have the update, right? So we've got the 2018 version.
Yeah.
Which gets you from 95 to 99.
That's awesome.
Right. And that's really all it is.
Yeah.
And that's what Rickson's Jiu-Jitsu is to me. It's the last 5% that the ordinary Gracies Jiu-Jitsu gets you to, but you just can't get any further. Just some people it doesn't work on. Well, with Rickson, he changed the angle a tiny bit or changes where his weight is, and all of a sudden, boom, 99.
Yeah.
Right. And that's always been our mentality. It's be ready for change. Right. Is this the way we have to do it? Yes. Is this the way we're always going to do it? For now.
Yeah.
Until Dave changes it.
What would an update look like? I mean, would it just be as straightforward as, hey, look, you remember the elbow escape that we used to do? Yeah, we're going to do it this way now.
Yeah,
right?
it
simple
could
as
be.
that, or
well, let's kind of look at self-defense concepts,
okay.
right? So with the headlock from behind and you throw them over, you know how you drop in base and you throw? And we don't drop in base.
Okay.
Yeah. What we do now is we push our hips back. So we push our butt into the person's hips.
Okay.
Right? Instead of dropping down, we push back through their hips and we walk backward as we start to bow.
Okay, cool.
And that elevates their feet. And then, it's funny because
that's really interesting because I do remember that quote unquote move.
Yeah.
And
the reason why we do it that way is because what
be.
if he's around your neck and you drop down into base and he instead pulls you backward?
Okay, yeah.
You'll fall right back.
Yeah, makes sense.
So Rickson's version and our version is all about preventing him from pulling you back.
How interesting.
So that's why you go hips forward, hips back, head forward. It's like kind of like boom. You're not dropping low anymore. Mm-hmm. Right. So when I showed that at a CTC, I said, okay, because I said, all right, headlocks, right? Because headlocks probably the most important thing you can learn, headlock escapes for getting out of a street fight. So I said, let's go over this particular headlock and then let me show you how you learned it. Is that how you learned it? Yeah. Okay. Now do it to me. So you do it and I pull them back. And they're like, oh. And I go, yeah, that's kind of a small hole in there, right? Mm-hmm. So how do you deal with it? So I try to get them to kind of figure out what they're going to do, and they still couldn't figure it out. I said, so here's what we do. So you do it to me, boom. And my hips engage right away, and they're like, and I go, and now watch, I'll take you over even though you don't want me to, right? I just back up, bend down, and boop, they fall right over. And it's that type of stuff that Rickson does that makes his jiu-jitsu so special. It's because and Dave kind of told me this. Rickson's philosophy is this: if the concept cannot be done by an 8-year-old girl, then it's not perfect yet. So originally, I'd say Rickson can do it. So then his question is, all right, I can do it. Can somebody who's less athletic and technical than me do it? So he teaches it to them, and if they can do it, great. Then he'll go down and down and down. Okay, so a small adult male can do it. Can an adult female do it? And then can a teenage female woman do it? And now can an 8-year-old girl do it?
Yeah.
And if he answers yes to the 8-year-old girl, to him, it's perfect. I'll go look for other stuff. And he's always looking to break his jiu-jitsu. Right? This works, but how do I break it? How do I make it not work? Right? And that's what Kama Jiu-Jitsu has lived under all these years, because Dave still sees Rickson 2-3 times a year. Yeah. Right? He'll go up and train with him, or Rickson will call him and say, hey, I'm working on this. Come on up. And then there'll be other coral belts that are there training, and Dave's there. Right? It's good. It's nice to be able to have access to Rickson like that.
That's amazing. That's amazing. One of the I was trying to think if we were talking about this on the podcast because we've been going at it for a bit, or if we were talking before. But I think we were talking before. I was living in Fort Lauderdale, and Rickson came through Daytona Beach. Still don't know why he was in Daytona Beach. There was really no reason. But he put his seminar on. It made its way through the Valente brothers, and so a bunch of us went up and did the seminar. And it still, to me today, is amazing. Like, first of all, what an opportunity to learn from such a legend. But then two, he wasn't telling war stories or anything like that. We were literally doing like guard retention and posture in the guard and that type of stuff. And so I was looking around, and there's all of these really high level folks that are there, and we're hitting on something that is just like so kind of day one. Maybe not day one, but it's like, there's nothing fancy about it, right? No. It's very, very fundamental, but different. It was something that I'll always remember that.
What he does to every black belt he hasn't trained is this. We all have our foundation in jiu-jitsu. Mm-hmm. What he does is he shows you where there's a big old sinkhole in your foundation.
Okay.
And you don't know it's there.
Yeah.
But he walks you over to that spot and goes, look at that. Right? And that's, let's say you're playing guard. Uh-huh. You're playing guard on him, and he just says, okay, don't let me punch your face. And he just moves his hands slowly, just like this. And you just see, I've seen black belts, their hands just go up in the air, and their legs open up, and their feet go straight. It's kind of like that whole, if you imagine rigor mortis, it's kind of like that. They get really stiff, and they don't know what to do. And he's not moving quickly at all. He's moving very slowly, calmly, talking to you. Mm-hmm. Now, if the speed were to pick up, that's definitely blows to the face.
Yeah, yeah.
But what he's doing in that case is he's showing you, yes, you know jiu-jitsu, but you're missing a big important part of jiu-jitsu. The whole foundational reason why Gracie Jiu-Jitsu exists. You're missing that.
Yeah.
And he used to get really pissed off when he'd go to seminar and he sees holes in their foundation like that, especially as they get to upper belts. And I know there's this one seminar that happened in Temecula, which is Southern California. A buddy of mine was telling me, he was there, he's a black belt there, and he said there were a bunch of black belts that were there, and they were asking Rickson, hey, can you teach us like more advanced stuff than this basic stuff? Rickson says, yeah, no problem. Here, let me show you this. And then the person, it was a female black belt. Her base wasn't what he wanted. So he said, okay, you don't quite have the base that we need. Okay, I need you to base for me. And then she still couldn't get it. So he said, okay, let's back up a couple steps, go more toward the beginner stuff. Okay, let's work on this. She still couldn't do it. She didn't have the correct base. So finally he goes, I can't teach you the advanced stuff if you don't even have base. And then he goes, and by then this guy tells me how you could see Rickson was visibly irritated.
Really?
And finally, he's trying to work with them, right? So he's trying to help her. No, still don't have it. Okay, let's back up. Still don't have it. Finally, in disgust, he goes, who gave you your black belt?
Ooh.
Yeah.
It's starting. Things are elevating.
Yeah. And she had degrees on her belt, too.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it was a bad situation.
Yeah.
Right, but that was early on. That was probably around 2012, 2013, when he had been back from Brazil for a little while after Rickson's passing. He went to Brazil for a number of years and then came back. But in 2018, when he did his tournament, Rickson Gracie Cup in Arlington, I had 8 guys that competed in that tournament, and then he joined us for dinner over at Heart 8 after that. And one of my blue belts at the time, brown belt now, asked him, because he did a seminar in his Rickson Gracie Cups. He did a 1-hour seminar. And saw that my students saw that people didn't know the stuff, even the advanced belts. And he asked Rickson, he goes, does that piss you off? He says, it used to. He goes, but what I've had to come to grips with is that people aren't learning jiu-jitsu anymore. He says, not at least the way that jiu-jitsu was taught to me. He said, so now I just, that's why he formed the Jiu-Jitsu Global Federation. Yeah. Was because he's just trying to find a way, create a vehicle to pass this information back down to people so they get it. So they can compete all they want, but his thinking is know the self-defense side of it as well. Yeah. Don't just be a sport athlete, be a sport athlete who can fight in his mind. Yeah. And he says MMA is not the same. MMA is good, but, and I share his view as well. MMA is another rules-based activity. Sure. Right, versus the old Vale Tudo that they used to do. Yeah. So you look at Kron Gracie's most recent fight. It didn't go well for him. Right. Part of it was because it's the rounds. When you have 5-minute rounds, it's different. It comes down to who's the better athlete. Yeah, favors a different type of conditioning. And who can go pedal to the metal for the entire 15 or 25 minutes, however long the match is going to be. Yeah. But with the breaks, so you train for 5-minute breaks, and you get your 5-minute rounds, and you get your breaks, and you're back in for 5 minutes. Whereas when they did rounds back in the Vale Tudo days, they do if I remember right, they go unlimited 10-minute rounds, or they might do 30-minute rounds. Okay. Right. So there's a lot more time to develop the fight. Yeah. But in 5 minutes, it's just whoever's the best athlete at the time. Right. And the UFC is largely a stand-up exhibition now. Yeah. It's true. It's like kickboxing with a little bit of extra in there because, let's say you're on the ground for too long. Guess what? The ref will stand you up. Right. But if you're on your feet for too long, they don't put you down on the ground. That's right. They don't say, hey, why don't you guys go ahead and clinch or something like that. Yeah. Or, that whole thing about not being able to hit a guy who's down on all fours. Yeah. Like when Frank Shamrock knocked out Renzo. Yeah. Right. Because he was underneath Renzo and he just, threw a knee up on Renzo's head. Yeah. And ended up getting disqualified for it. And I remember Frank Shamrock getting up after he got disqualified with his hands open, in the air, like, what the hell? I thought this was a fight. Yeah. That's right. Especially against a Gracie.
Yeah.
Right?
Can't hit to the back of the head. I mean, there's a lot.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff that, I mean,
Can't hit in the nuts.
right. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
I mean,
Whereas I don't know if you remember, but the early UFCs, you could
100%.
hit in the nuts.
Pull
Remember
hair. You could. I mean, you
Remember Keith Hackney getting his nuts punched? Oh, no. Keith Hackney was punching the nuts of Joe Sando. I still remember that.
Joe Sando, yeah, of course.
Just
yeah.
repeatedly punch him in the cup. Just punch. I mean, you can't do that now.
Yeah.
Now it's like, guys get hit in the nuts, and all of a sudden they're like, oh, they back away. I need some time. And, but back then the UFC, the Ultimate Fighting Championship, back when it was called UFC then, but you could hit him.
Yeah. I mean, half of Royce's match in one, it might have been UFC 2. I mean, he held on to the guy's ponytail.
Yeah, chemo.
Yeah, right, exactly. So, I mean, like, yeah, things just kind of changed. I remember, and I guess I'm kind of curious, we'll segue it into a question for you. I mean, we did it different ways. Like some nights, and me personally, like I can see the benefit of pushing yourself with a round timer, right? Like there's a different type of conditioning to go hard for 3 minutes or 5 minutes or whatnot. But most of the time, there wasn't even a timer on. It was whenever they just said, okay, guys, let's stop. Let's switch partners.
Mm-hmm.
You go with you go with them, pair us up or whatnot. And a lot of times those would be 9, 10, I don't even know. It would be longer rounds than standard. How do you do it? Do you use a round timer sometimes? Or
We use them.
Do you? Okay.
But we use them for different reasons. Okay. So let's say like last week, we were going over CASA escapes.
Okay.
Right. So what we do is after, you got to remember that we run a class on a 4-part. So we got the warm up for the first 30. We've got the self-defense for the second 30. We've got the groundwork. So let's say this is a CASA escape. We might have segued that the self-defense was about headlock escapes, right? Or headlocks against, pin you against a wall or whatever. And then you get out of that. That's your self-defense part. For the ground part, we'd segue into something that related to the self-defense concept, but on the ground. So CASA gatame, that's the head and arm, right?
Okay. Like a scarf hold. Like
a scarf hold, yeah. And then trying to get out of that. Well, once we finish that 30 minutes that has us getting out of that, so now we're going to be entering the fourth 30-minute period. So this the end of the second hour of class. Then what I'll do is I'll put the timer on for 3-minute rounds, and then that means we have 10 of them. So what I want to do is I want to have pairs start from CASA, and then you have to escape. Okay. If you escape, get back under CASA and do it again. We'll do that for 3 minutes. So what'll happen is I'll run you 5 rounds on top, just top. And then at the end of 15 minutes, then I'll have everybody grab quick water, get back to the same positions. This time you're bottom, and you're going to be bottom for 5 rounds in a row.
Interesting.
So in that way, it's just repeated drilling of that concept over and over and over to varying levels of stress.
It's making me really self-conscious about my scarf hold escapes.
Right. So when you
we're
think
talking,
about it,
I'm like, man,
if you're doing a CASA escape and you're on the bottom and you're in round 1, and let's say in the 3-minute time period you escape it 6-7 times.
Okay.
Right. Now times that by 5. Right.
Yeah.
So now you're doing it 30 to 35 times.
Yeah, under stress.
And then we switch the top to bottom. Then you get on top. Then you're on top for that many times. How many or how often is it in any class these days do you get those kind of repetitions for getting out of CASA?
Yeah, no, it's very true.
Right? Nobody does it like that. What they'll do is they'll teach CASA escape. And and they don't even warm up these days. Most classes go an hour, right on the hour, boom, done. Right? And then they'll have you do a quick stretch and warm up and all that. And they don't do a 30-minute warm-ups like we do. But we do them not because we thought of something different. We do it because that's what Rickson did. That's what Helson did. The Gracie Academy didn't do that at all. Gracie Academy is very how it is now, just every hour on the hour.
Okay.
But we do that so that your body gets the enough repetitions of doing that motions that you need, the basic motions. Part of our 30-minute warm-up is getting knee on the belly every single time. Right. And with them putting varying levels of stress, once your belt's colored, then the guy on top, I want you to put all the stress. I want you to smash him with your knee, drive your knee into his chest if you have to. Right. And then we do the escape. We do that so that when they're training, when they're rolling and somebody knee on bellies them, they're like, and they get out.
Yeah.
Why? Because knee on belly is a very stressful position for most people.
Yeah. We were talking earlier about rib injuries.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose there's a body conditioning element to that as well.
Well, yeah, by doing it every day, your ribs will develop that cartilage around there because your ribs are always getting compressed from the weight. Now, granted, we don't do that to white belts.
Yeah.
We once they get up to middle white belt, mid to late white belt, then they're expected to be able to get out of it and be able to withstand it. And when I teach that to them, I say the goal is that you not only withstand it, you can carry a conversation on while your opponent is driving his knee into your chest or your abdomen or whatever. Right? You need to be able to separate the operation of your lungs from your abdomen. Right? Your diaphragm needs to be able to still move your lungs while your abdomen is engaged. Right? So that's kind of stuff that we do in the warm-up, and it takes extra time to do it, but you do develop your members to have much stronger bodies. And just like I told you, our members in both Irvine, California, and in Flower Mound, Texas, they're mostly professionals. These are people that have any ambitions to fight.
Yeah,
they just want to be the best they can be.
Picking a fight on the North Shore.
Yeah. These guys just want to be the best they can be.
Yeah.
Now, if through jiu-jitsu we can do that, that's my reason for existence now. It's to make people the best they can be using the art that I'm teaching them as the tool to get there.
Yeah.
Right? So I want them to be able to get out of any case I've put onto them. The only way to do that is to make them do it 30, 60, 100 times. And if they come to class multiple times in a week, then they're going to get it more. Yeah. So by the end of the week, if they came 3 times, they got out of a legit case that somebody put on them and tried to hold them 100 times.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're just rolling with somebody, so, a lot of schools will do 45 minutes of rolling. How many times do you get put into a case of then? Maybe 3 times?
Maybe 0.
Maybe 0.
Yeah.
So the whole purpose for you showing up to class was to get better at that one concept, and you left no better than you walked in.
Yeah.
Right. So that's why we'll use a timer. But when the timing point, when we hit the top of the second hour, then I tell everybody, look, class is over at this point. I'm going to turn the clock off. You guys can just train and do whatever you want. Right. And I never ever kick anybody out of the building. Right. Stay as long as you want. I don't care. I'm going to go, but you guys have fun. I'll see you guys in the morning. Because when I started back on Highland Village, and we were another place down in Flower Mound over by Kroger, sometimes, we took the studio over after the Taekwondo school was done. So our earliest class either started at 8 p.m. or 8:30 p.m.
Yeah, that's late.
Yeah.
That's late.
That's the only option I had, though, without having to rent the whole studio.
Yeah.
So I'd be there sometimes till midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning.
I don't think my body operates that way. Like even the 8 o'clock class for me, that's it. I mean, some of it has been conditioning over the years, right? Like, cause I know at Fuentes, we had a sparring class. Sparring was not a part of the regular fundamentals or advanced curriculums. Now, maybe they do it different now. That was 10 years ago, but, we would do, whatever the prescribed curriculum was that night. It was up on the TV screen. Here's the 4 moves we're going to go through as part of the founding foundations. And then if you stay for the next class is sparring. That class started at 8 o'clock. So I was getting home. It was 9:30. You're jacked with hormones and, adrenaline and whatnot. And I'm, laying in bed at 11 still like, what can I take to get me to, I hate that, but it is what it is. I mean, if that's the only opportunity, I did it because that was what was available, so, hey.
I still have members asking, when are we going to go back to the 8:30 class?
Some people love it. They're like, I sleep like a baby. I'm like, man, my hands are still shaking at 11 o'clock at night.
A lot of the people is because they wanted to be able to have dinner with their families and put their young kids to bed and then do their training after that.
Fair enough.
But that's just the time that I had. Whereas now, we have the facility 24/7. I can make classes anytime you guys want.
Yeah.
I'm okay. You tell me when you want to train and I'll set it up.
I could pick your brain forever on getting the history lesson and whatnot, but I do want to get a little bit of just kind of advice. A lot of this is on how people can connect themselves to the stories that you've got. And obviously, you're on your 4th decade of training here. I mean, like the stories are a lot more than the average person. But inevitably there are people that come in that might not have ever even heard of Rickson Gracie. They're a white belt and they're just getting started. What advice, what guidance would you give somebody that's just getting started in the journey of jiu-jitsu today? Totally different than 1989 in Hawaii or in California or Brazil.
That's a good question. And the reason is because different schools have different ways of doing things.
Okay.
So what I tell my white belt students is I point to the whiteboard where a lot of our curriculum is, and I said, this is what you're going to be learning from now until you get your blue belt.
Okay.
And once you get to your blue belt, we'll add a few more things, but you're going to have to go back over everything on that board and be able to execute it at blue belt level. Mm-hmm. And once you get to purple belt, same thing. The only difference between the belts is a few added concepts, just a few, but a lot of execution. So a black belt does the same concept that a white belt learns, but he executes it like a black belt. Mm-hmm. And the difference for the white belt over time is to be able to execute that same thing better and better and better. Kind of like what I mentioned earlier about Rickson saying getting it close to being where an 8-year-old girl can do it.
Yeah.
We're going to get to the point where you're doing it with 100% strength, and by the time you're a black belt, you should be able to do it with 10% strength, for instance, and you'll do it cleaner. And that's really all it is. So now advice for a white belt, just learn the curriculum. Learn the culture of the studio too, because that's very important, because jiu-jitsu guys, they get to be kind of tribal.
Yeah, no, it's very true, even now.
And I think the reason is because of the fact that, there's a lot of trust that has to be built in. If I don't trust a guy, I'm not going to train with a guy.
Yeah.
Right? Because he may pop my elbow or whatever, but if I trust that this person will not hurt me intentionally. Unintentionally is different. It's just jiu-jitsu.
For sure.
You put yourself in a position to get hurt unintentionally all the time.
Yeah, we're not baking cookies here.
Yes.
Like
the question is, will you intentionally hurt me? And if I don't trust that you won't, then I'm not training with you.
Yeah, agree.
Right? So with the white belts, you need to learn the culture of the studio, because it's all about them trusting you.
Yeah.
Right? At the same time, as a white belt, you have to kind of walk in there with a bunch of trust that they won't mess you up.
Yeah.
Right. So I know there are some schools that are still kind of warped in their thinking, in that when somebody comes in, their whole thing is to mess you up.
Yeah.
Thinking that if I mess you up, then you're going to go, wow, how'd you do that? Teach me that.
Yeah.
Whereas most people, they're going to go, oh, crap, you messed me up. I'm not coming back again.
Yeah, 100%. I'm definitely that way. And I can tell you with local experience, as I tried to figure out where I was going to train when I got here, it wasn't just drop into the first spot. I walked into a couple places. There was one place that, even as I came here as a purple belt, nope, that's a recipe for disaster. That culture right there does not align with my views, and I'm not gonna let somebody do a flying heel hook on me, to show how awesome they are, or whatever, whatever the case may be. That's big health hazard.
Yeah, we don't get that happening in our studio. A lot of it is because of the fact that we're curriculum driven.
Okay.
And that every belt needs to know certain things. Mm-hmm. So if somebody comes into me as a white belt and they learn the white to blue curriculum, they're now a blue belt.
Yeah.
They train with a white belt. They know what that white belt knows and doesn't know.
Right.
And the rule in our studio is that you are not allowed to catch somebody with something they haven't learned yet.
Interesting.
If you do, you get ridiculed.
Yeah. Okay.
Because it's you had to resort to that to catch him.
Yeah.
Right.
That's
so
fair.
What am I supposed to do? I want to catch the guy. Well, you need to make yourself better at the stuff that you've already learned that they know.
Yeah.
You can do what they know better than them.
Yeah.
You just can't do something they haven't seen yet.
Yeah.
Because if you do that, here's what's going to happen. Number one, it's going to be you were too weak in what they knew to be able to beat them with what they knew. Number one. Number two is they're going to ask me now, what was that he caught me with?
Yeah.
And I'm going to have to go, all right, he caught you with this.
Yeah.
Well, how do I stop? It's going to just a whole bunch of rabbit hole. The deep rabbit hole questions is going to come out. It's don't make me go through that.
Yeah.
Okay. Just beat him with what he knows, because you were on that conveyor belt as well.
Yeah.
Right. You're further down the conveyor belt, but you can look back and you know what he's knowing.
Yeah. Good point. That's a good point. I guess along that same line, I'm sure you've had guys that have come in that have had some training experience or whatnot, and
no doubt.
It seems crazy to say this, but it's the original style of training is probably not the mainstream anymore. So inevitably, you probably, let's say a purple belt came in. Most likely, statistically anyway, they came up in more of a competitive or sportive environment or whatnot, and might not have some of the background. Is there an on-ramp for somebody like that, or how do you acclimatize them to, the Kama Jiu-Jitsu way or the Rickson Gracie way?
So
is it possible?
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's not an easy journey, which is why...
Probably for ego, I imagine it would be difficult to take a few steps backwards.
I'm not in their shoes, so I don't know.
Yeah.
All I know is that I get people that come in of various levels into the studio, all the way up to black belt, and that have trained before and that have been awarded rank elsewhere. And one thing that we typically do, so let's say, I've had a bunch of people come in with blue belts, and I give them an option. I go, the option is, well, you have two choices. You can, and I don't like to put it this way, but I said, look, as far as your belt goes, the only people that have a black bar in their blue belt are people who have learned the curriculum white to blue. Okay. Now, having trained with you for a few times already, you don't know it. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying you're not a blue belt. You're just not my blue belt. Yeah. So here's what I'll do. I have this other belt for you. Blue belt, but instead of a black bar, has a white bar. What the white bar says is it tells you that you haven't learned everything to fulfill an ordinary blue belt here. And it also tells everybody else, the other blue belts, that you don't know a lot of stuff, so I don't want them going after you just yet. Mm-hmm. And I want them to be able to take the moment aside to teach you if there's something you're doing incorrectly. That's what the white bar says. Mm-hmm. The black bar says you know it all, so you have no excuses anymore. Yeah. Yeah, you're in the tank, I guess. So one of my black belts, in fact, my first black belt that I ever awarded, his name is Zach Womack. He came in as a blue belt from a Hoist Gracie affiliate in North Carolina. He relocated here. He put the white bar on his belt. I put it on him. And on his black belt? On his blue belt. Oh, on his blue belt. Yeah, he's a black belt now. Okay, he came to me as a blue belt about 8 years ago. And he went through and learned the curriculum. And once he understood the way we structured, he comes over to me like 2 weeks later. And we call it the ladder. That's our methodology. He goes, Ryan, I just need to tell you. He goes, that ladder's unbelievable. He goes, I've been training for, 4 or 6 years at the time. I've been training for this long, and I've never learned that there's a way for me to learn jiu-jitsu like this. Mm. And at that moment, he understood the importance of how we structure the curriculum, and then he just set himself to learn it. And he never trained more than twice in a week because his job was working 70 hours a week. Yeah. It's a very common story, right? But within 3 months, he learned it all, and he was better than my other blue belts at it. Mm-hmm. So guess what happened? He got his blue belt with the black bar and another stripe on it. Right. So he got promoted, but he learned it quickly. And I've had brown belts from other schools come in, and they cannot submit a senior white belt with us. And I'm not saying these guys trained 5 years at white belt. No, these guys are like a year and a half, right? A year and a half. But their defense is good enough to where that particular brown belt, three I can think of right offhand. They came in and they knew a lot of stuff. They learned a lot of stuff, but they didn't know a lot of stuff. Yeah. Right? They learned it, but they didn't drill it 30, 40 times in a class, even once. They learned it one day and just try to throw it in sporadically over the course of years. And being that they were fed everything at once and nothing was put in an order for them. Learn this first, learn this next. Make sure you learn it before I teach you next. They weren't taught like that. Yeah. So they come in lost. They know a lot, but they're lost. In fact, I have one guy who came in, just recently joined us last month, black belt out of Central America, but hasn't trained because of COVID. They had really severe lockdown restrictions. Mm-hmm. Calls me up, says, I want to come by. Okay, fine. And then he says, just let you know I'm a black belt. I'm like, okay. And then I go, yeah, come on by. And he says, do you have any problem with me wearing? I'm like, no, you earned it. Wear it, right? So he says, okay, but if I join, what's going to happen? And I said, I don't know. Let's see what you know first. Yeah. Comes in. He's good. He doesn't know what we do. He doesn't know how we do it. But after him coming to visit a couple of classes, he tells me, and to this day, I've never seen his black belt. He won't bring it. Mm-hmm. So I said, you wear a black belt. You earned it. So what I'll do is I'll get you another belt with this straight black. There's no red bar on it. That red bar is incorrect for you here because you're not an instructor, because you need to learn the curriculum to teach it. So he says, no, I'm not even bringing my black belt. He goes, I just want to know. He pulled me aside, and I'm thinking, what do you got to pull me aside for? He goes, well, I really want to ask you if it's okay if I wear a white belt. And I'm like, but you're a black belt. He goes, I understand. He goes, that's why I'm asking you, because I want to start over again. Okay. So I said, okay. Like, if that's what you want to do, you can do that.
Yeah.
So he's starting over again, and he's having the time of his life. And he tells me how much he enjoys
that takes a lot of the chains off, you know.
It took the burden off of him, because when you wear a black belt, now you have that mentality. You have to defend it.
Yeah.
Right. And you know Mickey.
Yeah.
You know, he plays with a lot of black belts,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah, he's good. He's really good.
Right. And you know, but you can't say that I'm sandbagging him, because he's only been training 4.5 years.
Yeah. He
hasn't been training long. Right. But so this particular individual, he just says, if it's okay with you. Right. And I said, yeah, you know, it's your own. You can look at it as you're learning a completely different martial art.
Yeah.
And I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
Right. So, yeah. So that's what he wears.
That's
but
cool.
I've had others where they come in and they don't do well.
Yeah.
And they never come back.
Yeah.
And I message him, hey, how you doing? Want to come back? Come check it out. They're like, oh, you know, they give me excuses. Oh, I'm busy. But then they go and join another academy.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, you know, good luck to you. You know, I'm sorry that, you know, you're a good guy. You'd have fit in perfectly here, but I'm sorry that you're not joining here. But, you know, I wish you the best at the place that you joined.
Like anything, I mean, I think it does come down to ego, right? I mean, I obviously just trying to empathize a bit and think through, you know, what might be going through their minds. I mean, I know that you mentioned like just sort of, I don't remember how you phrased it, but just acclimating yourself to whatever the local sort of tribal culture might be, you know, and it is very unique school to school, even schools that have similar disciplines, right? And so if you were to come in, yeah, I mean, not knowing the rules of the game and whatnot, I mean, like, just forget about the fundamentals of it. It could be a pretty steep hill, I'm sure.
Yeah, if you're a beginner, just ask questions.
Yeah.
Right? Don't ever assume.
Yeah.
Right? Because you could assume the wrong way, and it could be something that really offends the people in the studio.
Yeah.
Right? Because every school has their own quirks and tendencies and cultures and all that.
Yeah.
But, you know, and I was told I never experienced what you experienced in the military. I chickened out when it was time for me to sign up. I went to college instead.
I wish I did that.
Right. But, you know, I've had friends in the military. They say that they really gravitate toward this because it's the closest that they have to what they had when they're in the unit.
Yeah, I could see that.
Or in the battalion, whatever, platoon, I don't know what you guys call it. But, you know, it's not nearly life and death.
Yeah.
But you could seriously maim somebody or injure them or kill them in an accident in the studio.
Yeah, no, it's
right.
true.
So they say that's what gets their adrenaline up to that level that they had. But it also, because you're in that situation where it's all about ultimate trust. I trust you're not going to break my leg. I trust you're not going to break my neck. Right. And you put that trust in your training partners, similar to a way like you put your trust in a guy in your unit who you don't like personally, but when the bullets start flying, you know he's got your back and you've got his.
For sure. For sure.
Right. So without me being in, you would know, but without me being in that other environment, I have to just say, okay, I'll take your word for it. But yeah, I mean, I do have a great sense of trust and affection for all my students, all my training partners.
Yeah.
And it lasts for decades. Even my friends in Hawaii,
really,
who I haven't trained with for decades, I can call or text them anytime. When I go to Hawaii, I can pop into their studio, I can put a gi on, and I can train, and it's just like back in the old days.
Yeah. I think it probably has more to do, as it relates to the military anyway, I think it has probably more to do with just the difficulty of it. And this is going to sound so crazy, but like the closest comparable that I have found in the civilian world to that is yoga. And in terms of tribalism, yoga schools are freaking, they're a club just like we are, you know, and you go in there and there's different ways that instructors teach, and it's because it's so damn hard. You know, it's like if you make it through the gauntlet of the beginnings of it, then, you know, there is a sort of a badge of honor there, just like in jiu-jitsu. I mean, and there's no question in my mind, like one of the elements of it that I like the most is that, this is just my own personal philosophy on this, right? This is how this is one of the things that I like about jiu-jitsu, is that I can come in with my 50% game, and I could come in with the best version of myself that I have available to me, and I can still personally really enjoy it. I might not do well, like my performance might not be there, but it's something that I could practice no matter what, with some exceptions, like severe injury or whatnot, which has happened. And that drives this just communal feeling, and this, I mean, like, these are my friends, you know, this is sort of like you said, I mean, like, this is, it goes pretty deep. And that was very similar in the military, where you got people that some of the friends that I've got that I was in the Marine Corps with are like, we're so different, like so different, but yet, have something in common together. So I think that's probably what drives it, which is cool. I hope that everybody can. And
it's funny too, because we're talking about the old school versus the new school. The new school is more like that, whereas the old school, they were more your frenemies.
Is that right?
Right. I mean, your friends.
In what way?
Well, because like I said, we'd always, like, what'd you get me with?
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
So there'd always be that antagonism. I'm gonna get you. Oh, you're not gonna show me? Okay, you wait. I'm gonna get you.
That's crazy.
Right? And of course, I'm not gonna try to hurt him.
Yeah.
But it's not friendly.
Yeah.
Right. It's not somebody that I would necessarily go fight for. Mm-hmm. It's like, I don't even like you. You're just somebody I train with.
That's crazy.
But you're a jerk. I mean, and I came across a lot of that in Hawaii, less so in Hawaii, and I came across a lot of that in Rickson school, because there was always that. It was a different type of competition, right, with your partners.
Yeah,
and there were guys that are about my size that I didn't like them at all when I trained with them.
Really?
Yeah, I trained with them.
It wouldn't flush itself out? I mean, like that wasn't something that just sort of self-corrected? It seems like it does now, right? Like people that have, sort of I wouldn't say evil mindset, but have just like the wrong motives, that they don't seem to last. They seem to get pushed over into the academy.
I can think of one who's a black belt now, so he lasted. But the thing is, though, you're there for the common goal of getting good at jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
Right. But at the same time, it was very much not a sharing type way. There wasn't a mindset of synergy. It was a mindset of a zero-sum game. I'm going to take it from you, but I'm not going to give you any.
Gotcha.
Right. And even Rickson, right? Rickson would
show. That's just not possible now.
Rickson would show his students everything, but he wouldn't show anybody else everything.
Yeah.
And it would be, I don't want you training over there, because if you train over there, they're going to see what you're doing, and they might pick up on it.
Yeah, a lot of conversations about that. Yeah.
That was kind of a big thing.
Yeah.
And,
it's just seemingly impossible to sort of shelter. Yeah. Sure. Let's just take a break. Okay. So let's see here. Getting back into it. So when did you guys open up? In Flower Mound or in Highland Village? I mean, 2013, 2014?
So in October 2013, we opened in Highland Village, and I had two students. They were the father and son that owned the location we were at.
Okay, gotcha.
So I trained 5 days a week. So they basically got a semi-private every day for the first 3 months.
I need that deal.
They got really good really fast, especially the son.
Yeah. I know the son. I mean, he is still really good, really fast. Super athletic too.
And then I had my first paying member in January, 4 months later.
Okay.
And then next one in February, and then started building from there.
Yeah.
And then as we got to about maybe 20, 25 members, we ended up moving our location to a place in Flower Mound, and worked out of that karate studio for about another couple of years, and then we moved over to that the gun range, Crossfire.
Okay.
A friend of mine was the one who built it, and he
is that where you're at right now?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, that was so those of you who watch our old videos, if you see red mats on the floor, that was that particular one inside the gun range. It was a huge mat. We had 2,200 square foot mat.
Dang, yeah.
But we were only there for 6 months, and then we got our own place.
Okay.
And that's where the Parker Square one. That's where we put in the suspended mats and all that, so we could do more judo and get thrown and not get hurt as easily.
Gotcha.
And then there for about 4 years, and then we opened our current location, which is I've signed a 5-year with a 5-year option. So the plan is to be there for 10 years.
You'll be there for a while.
Yeah, it's like a forever school. It's kind of the school of our dreams.
That's awesome, man. Congratulations. Looking back at all that, I mean, first of all, I didn't even mention this, but I mean, it must be weird, like having a podcast now. Like I'll have people that I'll meet that have heard me talk for several hours, like the kid that I told you that I met this weekend, he knows a lot more about me than I know about him. Before you came to my house today, I mean, obviously I had seen hours of your videos. I mean, I'm not
funny.
looking for Kama Jiu-Jitsu, not Googling in, but having had aspirations as Jiu-Jitsu as a business for a while, I watched one of your videos on starting a school. So I've been a student of yours and you didn't even know it. Having had all of the hindsight, having had, some really good mentors under your belt, and then now having, I guess, a decade or so as an academy owner here in Texas, would you do anything over? I mean, would there be any notable changes that you'd make if you could go back and talk to your 10-year ago self?
Thankfully, I got into this business having a lot of friends that own schools. And friends who...
I guess inevitably that ends up being the case, right?
Friends who are willing to give me the inside scoop on what they went through. And one thing I learned, it's less about, or it's equally, I guess, it's equally important about knowing what to do as what not to do.
Yeah.
So I've always been of the type to where I just want to know what I should not do, right? So I'd talk to some friends of mine, okay, if you had to do it over, what would you not do again? Oh, I won't do this. Okay, boom. So for sure, I'm not doing that. So I get a whole list of things that I'm not to do.
Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, I kind of have an idea because I know how to run a business on how to go forward. But I'd also make some phone calls. Say, all right, how you doing this part? Right? Now I'm thinking about what to do now.
Yeah.
Well, this is what I do. Okay, why do you do that? And sometimes it's, oh, okay, that's a better idea than what I had. So then I'll switch gears.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's, oh, you do it that way? Okay, here's how I do it. Oh, Ryan, I like your way better. Oh, okay. So then I know to stick with it.
Okay.
But a lot of times I just go and just kind of bump around and figure it out that way. I mean,
Yeah.
That's kind of how I like to learn. But like I said, I like to know what not to do.
Yeah.
But as far as what to do, let me play around with that a little bit because what might work for me might work differently for you.
What were the big not to do's? Or what were, I don't know if you could think of a notable not to do. I hate to do top 3 or something, but what would be a notable don't do?
As far as running the business?
Yeah, as far as running a business, yeah.
Okay, one thing that you need to do in running a business is you need to learn that running a business is expensive. And that
that would be a good lesson to at least accept before
a lot of people
endeavoring in this enterprise.
A lot of people think to themselves, I like teaching.
Yeah.
I love teaching jiu-jitsu and I get along with all these people. I want to own my own studio.
Yeah.
But what they don't do is they don't realize that when you run a studio, if you enjoy teaching, you're not going to teach as much as you might think you would.
Yeah.
Because you have to run the business. You have to enjoy running a business. And that's what people who decide to run their own school need to first understand. Do you enjoy running the business possibly more than you like training and teaching? Because you're going to be doing a lot of that work. Because if you don't do it, nobody else is going to do it. So one of the things that I did early on was I groomed instructors. And I groomed a lot of them. Whereas a lot of guys, what they'll do is they'll run the school and they might have their favorite student or whatever, and they'll teach that person only.
Yeah.
Well, if you were in sales like I was for 20 some odd years, you understand that life in general is a numbers game. And that if I teach one student, my luck will tell me that my student will leave me and go open his own school when I need him the most.
Yeah, right.
So if I teach 10 people over the years, right now I've got, I think, 13 instructors of varying degrees. I have like 4 black belts, 4 or 5 black belts, and the rest are lower. But if people want to teach, I teach them how to teach. We have an instructor training program. They can join that program, and I can teach them how to teach. Now, the hope is that a few of them will remain under the umbrella.
Yeah.
But I also know that several of them could leave. Well, that's fine, right? If you leave, then I hope that what you learned from me will help you in your business, right? I don't get upset about it at all.
Yeah.
But if you stay with me, then I will, try to make it worth your while.
Created an asset, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So that's what I think I did right that, other schools might want to do. Another thing is to have a formal training program for teachers.
Because you do have a formal instructor training program, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We've always had one. Even Dave had one, still has one. We run ours on Sundays.
Yeah. Really?
So that's when instructors come in and we go over any problems they might have had teaching a particular student, a particular class, a particular concept, and we fix it.
That makes a lot of sense.
Right? Or if there's a tournament, then we watch the video of the tournaments and I turn it to a teachable moment, both for the participant and for the instructors. We went we spent 2 sessions on that whole Henry Gracie lawsuit thing.
Yeah.
Right. And
yeah.
How to prevent that injury that happened, how to prevent it from happening, and how, as instructors, my instructors especially, I've always taught them how to teach concepts like that and stuff that are inherently dangerous and how to watch out for it. And it takes a program to make sure that everybody's on the same page.
Yeah.
But to just throw somebody out and say, oh, you're a brown belt now, go teach.
Yeah.
Without them knowing how to teach, you can't just do that. But most schools will do that. A lot of people, how'd you end up teaching? Oh, well, I was just the highest ranked guy one day, and the instructor didn't show up, so I just taught the class, and the instructor said, good going, keep doing that.
Yeah. It's so hard for me to imagine that in almost any other environment, but you're right. Like, for some reason, there is a large element of the jiu-jitsu community that has just failed to evolve there, and like, I know early on, I mean, you may have experienced this as well, but I mean, you came up in such a formal, regimented environment that it might not have been something that you came across, but surely you've heard of the situations where you roll in and it's like you said, like, hey man, who's got the big, okay, cool, he's a purple belt. Like, what do you guys want to learn today? Like, yeah, I don't know. Like, let's do a little bit of half guard or whatever, whatever it's a democratic way of sort of learning,
We do that sometimes.
Yeah.
In fact, I want to say, what was it, maybe on Thursday? Or it was just one day, maybe Tuesday, I can't remember anymore. One of my students, who's actually a junior instructor, had said, Ryan, I got a question on half guard. Something, okay, wait, I've got blue belts and up over there, and I've got white belts over here. So what I did was I turned one of my other junior instructors loose on the white belts, and I said, all right, I need to go about teaching guard pass 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah.
Right, which is on the white to blue curriculum.
Okay.
But for the colored belts, I'm going to work on half guard. Mm-hmm. Right. So we worked on half guard. So we're running 2 classes in one.
I see.
But it was both off of guard.
Yeah.
Right. And one was just the more advanced guys learn half guard, and the less advanced guys learn guard pass 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah.
But the blue belts and stuff, they already know guard pass 1, 2, and 3. So now we're working on more advanced stuff. But in that way, I had a plan originally, but then since he had asked, and he's a competitor of mine and an instructor, I thought, okay, let's go take care of yours, but I'll also figure a way to segue it into the other students as well.
Yeah.
But usually I'll come in with an idea of what we're going to go over, and more often than not, it's a defensive concept. Mm-hmm. Probably, I'd say 3 out of 5 or 4 out of 5 classes has to do with defense.
Makes sense, especially after all we had talked about too.
Yeah.
I mean, inevitably there's things that you're defending against offense, right? So, I mean, there's still an element of it that's baked in.
And if your defense is solid, what do you have to worry about?
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, not much.
And that's the thing that Dave has always instilled in me, and Rickson's always instilled in all of us, right? It's defense comes first.
Yeah.
And dealing with the bad situations and learning how to be comfortable in them before you worry about being comfortable in good situations.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things in life that's so important about jiu-jitsu, right? That whole embrace the suck. I mean, that's the military side, right?
Yeah.
Like when you're going through basic, they make life hard for you.
Yeah.
But you have to learn to embrace it and realize that at the end of the day, it's to make you better, but it's also a game you have to learn how to play. Sure. And that's what jiu-jitsu is. It's to make you better, but it's also a game you have to play.
Yeah. Yeah. It is amazing how often you go back to that as well, and like deeper in the rounds. I mean, even in competition, I mean, I know there's pros and cons, but I mean, dude, it's hard, and there's a lot of different things that you're dealing with in that type of environment, and being able to go deeper into that hole, that little pain cave that you've created over years and years and years of hard training. I mean, like those parallels into life, I mean, inevitably come there as well. Like, I seriously doubt, you'll have a direct correlation on like a security that you're diving deep into or something along those lines, right? But like being able to sort of rely on pain thresholds that have a common ground, I mean, like that is helpful, and everybody can learn from it. Similar question, and starting to close things out just a little bit here, but I asked you about things that you might do different on the business side. You've come up, like I said, you're entering your 4th decade of training, and you've seen more than a history lesson that most won't have the opportunity to see, and like we're kind of chronicling and in sort of logging now. Would you train any differently if you could go back?
No, absolutely not. And it's funny you asked this because Dave and I had a conversation back when we were visiting an affiliate in Arizona that we used to have. And it was in Sierra Vista, which is an army town, and there's nothing around. And we were trying to grab some coffee. Like Dave and I we always grab coffee, and we kind of debrief and catch up. So it was one morning we were going to grab coffee, and there was no Lyft and no Uber to take us to the nearest Starbucks. So the nearest Starbucks is actually inside of a grocery store, and it was 1.5 miles away. So we walked it. Okay. Not a big deal. And while we're walking, I noticed Dave is walking funny. His legs are kind of, you can tell he's lived through a life of a lot of injuries. Mm-hmm. And I just happened to be slower walking. I was just kind of thinking, and I walked behind him. I noticed he walked funny, so I caught up to him, and I said, "Hey, Dave," and he goes, "Yeah." And I go, "Your body's all messed up." He goes, "Yep, from all these years of training." I said, "So let me ask you this: if you were to be able to go back to 25-year-old Dave and tell him, 'Hey, 25-year-old Dave, I've been through what you're about to go through, and what I would do is I'd advise you against doing this, or do this.'" Here I go, "Would you tell 25-year-old Dave?" He says, "Absolutely not." And I said, "Why?" He says, "Because if I did, then I might not be walking here next to you today." Right? And I thought about it, and I go, you're right. Because I went through a lot of injuries. Now, granted, I learned from the injuries, but I accept the injuries and I just continue on. Right? I've got jacked up shoulders. I had 2 shoulder surgeries in 2020. I had 2 knee surgeries in 2008, and pop rib, like we talked about. And countless times when I was a white to blue belt, I got my elbows popped. Yeah. Right? Yep. And would I ever erase those experiences? No. Mm-hmm. They sucked. Yeah. It hurts, right?
Yeah.
And
Character building.
And you can't train during those times you're injured. Yeah. Right? So that's a regret that I have, not being able to train during those times. But would I not do it again? No. I'd go through it exactly the same. And it was confirmed when we met with Rickson once, met him over at a park in Palos Verdes, California. And we were supposed to meet just to talk business for 30 minutes and was going to buy some merchandise and all that. He ended up giving Dave and I a 2-hour semi-private in the park. But prior to that, he had to stop and excuse himself and do some stretches on the mat that he had brought out. And he says, "Man," he goes, "it's just all these injuries. I need to, stretch out a little bit. So forgive me for 30 seconds while I stretch out." And he goes, "This is my reward for training in jiu-jitsu my whole life." And I thought he was being facetious. Mm-hmm. And I looked at him, and he goes, "No, really, it's my reward." He goes, "This pain that I'm going through every day in my life today, it's made me what I am today. And it's given me the life that I've been able to lead." And he goes, and I'm a happy man. I lived the life I wanted to lead.
Wow, interesting.
So that's when it kind of put it all into perspective for me. And then it made me realize that, there are a lot of mistakes we do in life. But the moment you stop trying to be better and you start to accept the mistakes as, well, that's just what I am, then you've failed. Mm-hmm. But if you take that mistake and go, okay, how can I do it better next time? Then you move on to doing it the correct way. But had you not made that mistake in the first place, you wouldn't be doing it the correct way. And it's the same thing with jiu-jitsu. Had I not been injured in my various injuries, would I, it helped me learn.
Yeah.
It was a painful way to learn. Yeah. But I learned nonetheless. And that's the most important thing. Now, I don't encourage my students to get into injuries or get injuries.
Of course. Yeah.
I'll stop them and I go, "No, stop, tuck your feet in." Especially when people like you're in somebody's guard and your feet are flared out. Yeah. I say, "No, tuck your toes under." Well, why? Well, if somebody hip bumps you and your toes are out, you're going to bust your ankle or your knee. Yeah. So tuck your feet in.
Thinking about that makes me cringe. Yeah.
And if I can help somebody, if I can prevent them from getting an injury because of one that I suffered or somebody else suffered, then that means I learned from my mistake or somebody else's mistake, and I'm passing that on to my student. Yeah. Right. So that's, would I do anything different in that way? No. I mean, because had I not gone through that, I wouldn't know what I know today. Mm-hmm. Right. And there are a lot of people when they're instructing, I'm thinking, and I'll cut this, like I'm going to teach all over the place, right? So I'll see somebody, I watch some people training, and I'll hit the instructor, and I'll go, "Look at that. You see that?" And he'll look, and I go, "Yeah." I go, "What's going to happen to his toes if he gets hip bumped?" "Oh, you better go tell him."
Yeah.
Right? So they go and tell him, right? But, it's just something that you need to look out for your students. And the same thing with regard to that when we talked about the Southern California guy who got his neck broken, right? Yeah. That could have been preventable. Yeah. Prevented. That was preventable. The instructor should have taken some steps to make sure it didn't happen.
The rule that your white belts live by. I mean, if they haven't been through that in the curriculum, you don't do it.
Correct.
That one rule right there enforced and embedded in the culture would have, presumably anyway, prevented that.
But even I've showed my instructors and my students, I could do that same thing to you, but as I'm going, I need to kind of stop midway, which you could, and just whisper, turn your head the other way.
Yeah. Or I'm going over your shoulder.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'd just say, turn your head the other way. Don't look the other way. And they'll stop. And as soon as they do, boom, I'll finish it.
Yeah.
Or if they don't understand what I'm doing, I'll probably use my shoulder or something to physically move their head the other direction if I want to keep moving. Otherwise, I'll just stop. I'll move on, do something else. And I'll go, okay, look, when you're in this position here, you need to make sure your head is like this.
Yeah. It's funny. That's exactly what Henner said in his, one of his
He
followers.
was 100% right.
Yeah.
I had some school owners calling me, what do you think about this? And they're all pissed off at Henner. I go, why are you pissed off at Henner?
Yeah.
Well, because he's trying to shut the door behind himself. He's got this 1,500 student thing plus however many tens of thousands they have in Gracie University, making a shit ton of money. He's just trying to close the door on us that has. I go, no, he's not.
Yeah.
If you listen to what he says, he is absolutely right.
Yeah.
Right. And when you think about it, when Clark, who was on the other side of the aisle, when they asked him, could it have been prevented? Yes. Do you do it this way? No.
Yeah.
That was the end of it right then and there.
Yeah.
Right. And it's true.
Mm-hmm.
We as instructors, as school owners, we have to protect our students the best we can. Now, I tell every student, I'm going to do my best to protect you. But just so you know, you're in an activity where you can get injured badly.
Yeah.
But then I say, look, you can get injured badly in soccer.
Yeah. Basketball.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, 100%.
You can get injured doing anything.
Yeah.
But I want to try to make it as close to, you not getting injured as much as I can, but I cannot guarantee it, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Right. And that's one of the things that as running a school, you have to go in with this mindset. You can't just think to yourself, I'm going to open a school because I think it's pretty cool to teach and I can make some side money doing it.
Yeah.
Right. I don't care about the money. Neither does Dave. We don't take a salary. We have our own jobs. We make our money that way. All the money just gets reinvested back into the school.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But a lot of people, they live on their studio income. Right. That's what they use to make their living. So they're going to approach it with a different mindset. So they may keep a student who may be a troubled student on because he's paying his membership.
Yeah.
Right. Whereas my thinking is, this student really doesn't fit in. Going back to the old tribal talk again.
Yeah. Right.
Doesn't fit in. So you might want to look for another school.
Yeah.
Thankfully, I've never had to have that conversation with anybody. I've had students leave on their own because of that. But that's fine. If they want to self-filter out, that's good to go.
Yeah.
Save me the conversation.
That sure would be ideal, for that to be able to,
But it's not as if they were driven out.
Yeah.
They just kind of got to looking around and going, I don't really have anything in common with these people.
Mm-hmm.
And they then tell me, okay, Ryan, my membership's going to end. And I always ask why. What did I do wrong that I can kind of, make it better for later on?
Yeah, the post-mortem action. Yeah.
Ryan, I just really don't like you. Or, Ryan, I just don't feel comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
I say, you know what? I get it, and thank you for telling me.
Yeah.
And if I like them, I always say, just know that you're always welcome back.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I regret that you had to leave for whatever reason, but just know that we'll as long as we're here, you're always welcome back because you are always a good student here.
Yeah.
Right. But if they don't feel at home, then they're not going to feel at home. They need to, just like I mentioned earlier, you need to feel like you can trust them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just like with new people, the advice is try to just absorb.
Yeah.
Don't try to teach. Don't try to, don't explain too much in the beginning. Just ask a lot of questions. Find out how your instructor thinks.
Yeah.
Right. A lot of people,
you'll get a good feeling right away as to how that's even responded to, you know? Yeah. I mean, I like the older, especially in an environment where we're in right now, like we're not on a college campus, right? Where you've got NCAA athletes that are making up your membership base. You've got, like you said, doctors, lawyers, accountants, a whole gamut of folks. At some point, I mean, you don't know what you don't know when you walk in the door, but after you've been going at it for long enough, like I said earlier, I mean, we're not baking cookies here. I mean, there's a little bit of violence and action that's taking place in a controlled environment. You're a grown up. You need to take ownership of your own training a little bit as well. And like, if you feel like you're getting thrust into a world that you're just not ready for yet, I mean, like, you're an approachable guy. I mean, I could come and have a conversation with you. And I mean, now that I know you anyway, I mean, here's something that happened tonight, like kind of, am I good here? Right. Or I just don't feel it, like my body's not up to it or whatnot. I need to be on the other side of this. I don't know. I can see why like the we're not happy till you're not happy approach can sort of be attractive to some people, but like in terms of longevity, it just, I don't know. It's,
as a school owner, I have to realize that not everybody's going to feel like what I feel, or what the long-term members feel being here.
Right.
The long-time members, they were the ones that told me, this changed your lives.
Yeah.
And jiu-jitsu has changed my life, but I never assume it changed your life or anybody else's life.
Right.
To me, I'm just assuming you want to learn jiu-jitsu, and I happen to know it, and I'll teach it to you.
Right.
But whether it changes your life or not, that's awesome.
Yeah.
But I never assume it.
Yeah.
And if I never assume it, I never expect it. If I never expect, it's like loyalty, right? A lot of people expect loyalty. I hope to gain loyalty, but if I don't get it, then the question is, I ask myself, I go, do I want that loyalty or do I not? Same with respect. I never demand respect. You can't demand respect out of somebody. They either respect you or they don't.
For sure.
So then my question to myself is, how do I earn your respect? What do I need to do? And sometimes I'll ask, if you're an enigma to me and I don't understand you and I can't figure you out, I'll just go, you know what? Forgive me here, but I'm trying to figure you out. And what do I need to do to earn your respect or your trust? And then you tell me, and then it's like, okay, I can do that. If I can't do it, then, okay, then, all right, I guess. In my mind, I go, okay, I guess I'm not going to have
We're just not a match.
Yeah.
And
that's fine too. But, as a business owner, you have to realize you can't serve everybody.
Yeah.
Right. So for us, we didn't go the MMA route, right? We didn't go the sport route. Now, what our students can do is they can compete, and they compete very successfully. But I'm not teaching them to compete. I'm teaching them to protect themselves.
Yeah.
And really, the only difference between what we do and what they do in competition is just don't hit the guy.
Yeah.
Oh, and by the way, slams are illegal, so don't slam them either.
Yeah.
Right.
Apply the rule set.
Yeah, and that's really it. But we don't train to the rule set, which is what I think mistakenly a lot of schools are doing now. They teach to the rule set. So if you always teach somebody that something is illegal, in a fight, everything is legal.
Yeah.
Right? So if you teach them, you train them to don't worry about being slammed when you get picked up because it's illegal to slam you anyway. It's like, no, that's wrong. You have to ask your students, why did you come here in the first place? Did you learn how to compete, or to learn how to compete, or to learn how to fight?
Right.
Well, I
that's the key question.
Right.
Yeah.
So as a school owner, you have to make that determination. Right. Either go all into competition, all into MMA, or with us, we're all into self-defense, Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, and the Rickson strain of that Jiu-Jitsu.
Yeah.
Right. That's our niche.
Yeah.
Now, if that means we're going to have 25 students or 2,000 students, I don't know.
Yeah. No, that's something really honorable about that. And I think I see that in a lot of different industries as well, not just jiu-jitsu, where companies get confused. I mean, are we a product company? Are we a price company? And they're playing in this middle ground, as opposed to just going all in on something and believing in the product for what it is, and whatever the outcome is, it's just the consequence that was already written.
Yeah.
We're just sort of exposing it,
We're all in for Rickson.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So I have a friend who was an Eskrima guy. Right, so put a knife in his hand and he will destroy you.
Yeah, put a Sharpie in his hand and watch him mark you.
Exactly, right. And that's what happened with Kenny Gabrielson when I trained with him. He just held a marker and he would just mark us all up.
Yeah.
And then, but I learned from Rickson, right, and Helson and all that. So, but he had a specialty prior to that because he trained with Paul Vunak, so he learned all that Santos stuff, right?
Okay.
But when he had knife classes and stuff, I wouldn't go to him. Right. And the reason why I wouldn't go to him is not because I didn't want to learn how to handle a knife or deal with somebody with a knife. It's because it wasn't part of Gracie Jiu-Jitsu.
Yeah.
It's something else. So if you take Rickson's Jiu-Jitsu, and, this friend of mine told me, that knife defense that you guys do, it's not all that good. And I said, okay. And he goes, you really should do it this way. And I said, okay. And I go, but, I've also had people tell me that our wrestling is not that good, so I should do it this way. And other people say, your stand-up boxing is not all that good, so you should do it this way. So if I keep pulling pieces out of what Rickson teaches and substitute with somebody else, then I no longer have Rickson Gracie Jiu-Jitsu anymore.
Yeah.
Kama Jiu-Jitsu not doing that anymore. Now we're doing parts of Rickson Gracie's Jiu-Jitsu.
Right.
So that was a decision that Dave made, and he says, if Rickson doesn't do it, we're not going to do it. We're not going to teach it in the academy. But does that mean that I can't go out and learn Eskrima? No, I can. I can learn it. But when it comes time to teaching knife skills in the studio, we're teaching whatever Rickson does.
We're teaching our way, yeah. Now, otherwise, I can totally see it. It's a slippery slope.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's the way that De Valente's already always said it as well. It's about the completeness of it, right? This is a spot where you could come in and you want to do stand-up grappling? Okay, that's possible too. We're not starting on our butt. This is, we do ground grappling as well. We also do stand-up self-defense. We work with weapons. We strike, so, I mean, there's a completeness to it. And, yeah, you could pick it apart. You know,
Where I think a mistake is a lot of people, well, I do jits for my ground game. It's like, well, I mean, you're not learning all of jiu-jitsu that way, and then when you do it that way, then you end up missing some stuff that incorporate on the feet onto the ground.
Yeah.
So by not learning the stuff that happens on the feet, the base, the balance, everything, it's all there.
Yeah.
And it's on the ground too. So it's different. If you don't learn it both ways, you don't learn it completely, which is why there's a lot of concepts we do on the ground that people at other schools don't know, but it's something that's in self-defense.
Yeah.
Right? And it's like, had you learned self-defense, you'd see this here on the ground too.
Yeah.
Right, but like I said, that's our conscious decision, and everybody makes their own decisions in how they want to run their business, and you're going to run it to the way that you are comfortable in. So my goal is to make it so all the future Kama Jiu-Jitsu instructors are comfortable doing it the way I teach them, so that when they teach, they can perpetuate Rickson's and Dave Kama's art. That's the idea. Whereas if I don't teach them everything in the way that it's done, then when they go on to do their own studios, they're going to now have to improvise, or they're going to have to outsource that particular part of the curriculum.
Yeah, you've taken care of that for them, basically.
Well, I try to, and it's up to them to do what they're going to do.
Yeah.
Right. Dave has been 100% faithful to Rickson's Jiu-Jitsu. You know, he's had many opportunities to go train elsewhere. I've had opportunity to train elsewhere. But since I've been with Dave, I committed to learning Rickson's Jiu-Jitsu through Dave. And it's because Rickson wasn't teaching anymore. I don't know if I'd have gone back to Rickson. I probably would have. But anyway, Dave turns out to be the best teacher I've ever had, you know, in all aspects of life. So in running a business, coming in with that value set, the goal is just my question to ask myself is, how would Dave do it? And if I don't know how Dave would, I call Dave. Dave, how would you do this? This is the way I would do it. Okay, this is how it's going to be done. Right, and then that way I can kind of stay faithful to both Dave and to Rickson, and then to our students, so they can have confidence. You know, you can go to Rickson Gracies seminar and they can see what Rickson's teaching. They go, oh yeah, I learned that as white belt.
Yeah, I've got a connection to it. Yeah,
yeah,
that's super cool. So that's a good segue in to what we really will be kind of closing things out here. I always say this, and then I find ways to stretch another 30 minutes in with my own little rabbit holes, but. What is next? I mean, this has got to be one of the most sort of historical podcasts that I've done in any way. And what comes next? I mean, you've opened a successful academy. You've got students that have made waves throughout. Like, there would be no way for us to have met in any other way than some of the connective tissue that you've created in the area. You know, you've got one of the most legendary lineages there is. What goals do you have, and what's next for, I guess, Ryan Young and for Kama Jiu-Jitsu?
So it's funny you asked that, because back in 2014, when I had been in Highland Village for a year, I was talking to Dave one day. I still remember I was sitting in the parking lot there after I just finished teaching a class. And I said, Dave, I don't know what you want to do going forward, but we can make this a thing. And he says, yeah. And I said, yeah. I said, what do you want to do 5-10 years from now? He goes, if I can just travel and teach, he goes, I'd be happy. And I said, okay. I said, so let me figure out how we can make that happen for you. And one of the ways to do that is I just have to get Dave out there.
Yeah.
Prior to, say, 2013, only people who were of the very old school knew who Dave Kama is. But nobody else knew who he was. And they could look, and people would look at the Dirty Dozen list and see Dave Kama on there, but it doesn't mean anything special to them. They don't know who he is. All they know is that Rickson produced two of them, Chris Saunders and Dave Kama, but that's all they know.
Yeah.
So what I needed to do was, based on what Dave wanted to do, I go, you know, how do I, because I asked Dave, I go, what do you want to do? He goes, well, I want to honor Rickson, right? I want to make sure that Rickson's Jiu-Jitsu is taught, because it's not anymore. I said, okay, so that's how he wants to honor Grandmaster Rickson. So my thing is, how do I honor Dave? Dave, his choice in life is to retire out from work and then just travel and teach. How do I do that? I need to make sure he's known. People know who he is.
Yeah.
So that's where we create the website and kind of give history on him, and that's where we started to create the YouTube channel.
Yeah, which is cool. I mean, I actually really like your videos.
The funny thing is, though, with regard to the YouTube
no connection
channel,
to it anyway. I mean, other than
with regard to the YouTube channel,
him.
people still don't know who Dave Kama is. They've heard of him.
Yeah.
The funniest thing
I thought you were Dave Kama.
I know. Even though I say, hey everyone, Ryan Young, Kama Jiu-Jitsu. Hope you're doing well. That's exactly my intro, right?
I know.
But people walk up to me and they go, Dave, and I look at them, I go, Ryan, and they go, my name's not Ryan. I go, yeah, but my name is. And they go, oh, right. One guy at a
I'm
tournament.
glad to know I'm not the only one.
Oh no, yeah. One guy at a tournament came up to me and called me Dave, and Dave was standing next to me. I hit him. I go, I think he's talking to you. And the guy looks confused. And I go, you said Dave, right? He says, yeah. And I go, that's Dave.
Yeah.
And they go, you? I go, Ryan Young. And they go, oh, yeah, sorry about that. But it's because I tell Dave, I need you to make a video on this subject. I don't get the video. So I talk to Greg, his assistant. Greg, make it happen. Oh, I can't make it happen. I go, why can't you? He goes, I'm not going to tell Dave what to do.
Yeah.
I said, then tell him I'm telling you to do it.
Yeah.
But it doesn't happen. So it kind of got to be an accident that I ended up being on all the videos.
Yeah. Yeah, it's his name on it, and you've become the face.
I'm just a spokeshole.
I mean, and you guys have done a good job. I mean, presenting unity and command, I suppose, like with the website and whatnot. Like having done a little bit of research and history lessons, you know, kind of leading up to our meeting face to face. You know, I was impressed by the fact that like it is one flag, right? Like it's kind of, it's not like there's Kama Jiu-Jitsu DFW, our own little separate thing, doing our own thing.
No, he owns all 3 academies.
Okay,
and when people sign up for classes, you can sign up for a class at any one of the 3 campuses. Mm-hmm. So if you're a member of one, you're a member of all 3.
Yeah.
Right. And the
That's
teachings,
solid.
the values. And the reason is because I don't want to be that lead guy. Uh-huh. Right. That's why I don't insist on having Ryan Young Jiu-Jitsu. Yeah. Right. It's Kama Jiu-Jitsu, and Dave Kama is the head, and I'm okay with that. Yeah. And like I told him, have you read the book 48 Laws of Power? No. Okay. So the first rule, if I remember right, is never outshine the master.
Okay. Seems like pretty.
And the reason is because if I outshine the master, then I'm the one that gets killed. So I let the master take all the arrows. I'm going to stand behind him. And I tell him, it's funny. We joke about it. But the thing is,
an affectionate way to see things.
Dave is like a Pedro Sauer, though. I don't know if you know much about Pedro Sauer.
I don't know much about him.
He is universally liked.
Yeah.
Dave is that person. Okay. I'm the polarizing one. Yeah. I'm the one that people, I'm the hot or cold one. You either love me or you hate my guts. Yeah. And I'm okay with it. Whereas with Dave, he doesn't care. But because he doesn't care, and he's such a nice guy, so affable, everybody loves him. Yeah. So when I try to play the old good cop, bad cop thing in the academy, they know it's not Dave. Yeah. But they know what Dave's values are. So I just say, this is the way Dave wants, and that's the way it is.
That's cool.
Right? But it's not easy for me to make Dave look like the bad cop here, as easy as it is for him to make me look like the bad cop in California. Gotcha. Where he is. Gotcha. So everybody gets pissed off at me. But it's okay because I don't mind that part. It's just as long as it gets done, that's all I think about. Yeah. But yeah, it's just, I could train under a lot. I could have trained under a lot of people, but I train under Dave, and I'm not going anywhere. So just like how he could have trained under anybody, but he stayed with Rickson, even when Rickson left. And he didn't talk to Rickson for 5-6 years. When Rickson came back to the U.S. and got back in touch with Dave, then they just picked up where they left off. Gotcha. And that's the way it kind of is here. Mm-hmm. So.
How do we close things out? I mean, we went down, gosh, I feel like I could pick your brain for the rest of the day. I've kept you like under house arrest here since, I think we're going on.
Luckily, it's my night off.
3 or 4 hours here. So
I'm going to run the studio anyway.
Thank you so much for being so generous with your time.
My pleasure.
And thanks again to Mickey for brokering the conversation. I should have been a better patron locally here and reached out in advance, but really has been an honor kind of hearing the story here in the background and knowing that somebody like that is here locally, which is kind of crazy. And
I love sharing what I know, right? I don't know everything, but I did know a lot of Gracie family members. Yeah. So I was able to pick their brain, and because I did establish a relationship with them, and I feel, in a way, very sorry for people like you. Mm-hmm. Not as a person, but that you don't have the ability to have trained day in and day out under the people that I got to train day in and day out under. A lot of people only have exposure to them through affiliates. Yeah. Right. So what does that mean? So if you won't be able to get Rickson out in a seminar these days, but Rickson still gives them actively to his member academies, right? So you're a guy training in, I don't know, let's call it Maryland. It's the first thing that comes to my head. At a Rickson affiliate in Maryland, and you train and you meet the grandmaster for the very first time, right? And he puts your blue belt on you, and you're so proud because Rickson put the blue belt on you. But the problem is he put it on you because your professor told him to put the blue belt on you. Right. So it's tough because you didn't get to train day in and day out. You didn't get to have Rickson chewing you out for doing something stupid, right? I mean, I got chewed out for going half guard on somebody when I was a white belt. I got chewed out for letting somebody pick me up while I was playing guard. I mean, enough to the point where I never did it again.
Yeah.
In that same context.
Yeah.
Right. So guess what? That's how I learned. I mistakenly or correctly figure that's how everybody else learns too.
Yeah.
Right. So that's why I'll just go, I'll yell at them, not because I'm mad, but it's more for effect.
Yep.
Right. Because that's the effect that worked on me. I'm sure Rickson wasn't mad at me because we went out after that. Right. But
it's like I said before, affection. Right.
Yeah.
I mean,
but that's how I was taught. And those are the life lessons that I've learned. And that's why to this day, we don't change anything.
Yeah.
People, why do you do it that way? It's because that's the way Rickson did it. That's the way Rickson did it. That's the way Horian did it. Right? So that's why we do it that way. But I had the value and the benefit of learning that. And it wasn't intentional. It was purely my timing. There aren't many things in life where my timing was perfect on, and that's one of them.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely hit it at the right time.
Whereas people that come in now, they're never going to get to learn under Royce or Horian or Rickson. Right? Even if you go to Gracie Baja, you're not going to learn under Carlinhos anymore.
Yeah.
Right? You're going to learn under several generations down.
Right.
Right? So how can I honor what Dave's taught me? And how can I honor what Rickson has taught Dave? And Rickson's taught me as well. The only way I can honor it is to do it as they did it with me.
Yeah.
And that way I can perpetuate the art so that Rickson's jiu-jitsu does not die.
Yeah. Because
he didn't have very many people he taught. Because during his teaching years, those important teaching years, he was fighting. He chose to carry that torch of being the Gracie family flag bearer.
Yeah.
Right. That's what he chose. So he had to spend all his time keeping himself up, keeping his skills up, so that anytime he got challenged, he could accept it and not have to wait. And not say, oh, okay, well, let me have a training camp. It's like, no, it's like, we're going to go now. Like that Japanese fighter that we talked about.
Right.
It happened right then and there. It's like, oh, okay, you won't sign this. You won't sign this. You don't want to agree to have your manager contact mine. All right, all we have to do is fight now. All right, get on the mat. You reporters out.
Yeah.
And then, okay, let's fight.
Yeah.
But that's because he always trained and trained and trained. But because he was doing that, he couldn't raise a stable of fighters.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Like Baja Gracie, they had dozens of black belts before they became Gracie Baja. Rickson doesn't have dozens of black belts. He probably only has 3, maybe 4, 5 at the most that he taught daily that are still teaching to this day. Right? All the rest were, people that he'd kind of visit here and there, teach. They get promotions as well. But as far as a day in and day out, very few of them.
I mean, I guess that's the thing though, right? Like it or not, I mean, it's always good to look back and wish we could all kind of be there, but I mean, the flag must get passed along, Yeah. So I mean, that's the gauntlet being thrown down for the rest of us. The next generation has to pick it back up and having that bridge between the then and now, is a big part of what you're doing.
And my hope is that my instructors continue that.
Yeah.
No, they're all individuals. They're all adults. They can do whatever they want.
Yeah.
But my hope is that at least some of them will keep up with the tradition so that at least the efforts that Dave and I are putting in can then be multiplied out.
Yeah, right. Scale it up.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love it. And I mean, like I said, I mean, can't thank you enough for the time. I mean, this has been a real pleasure. And I think that is the gauntlet being thrown down for the rest of us right there. I mean, know your history. And I think that, it is tempting to sort of put yourself in sort of a swim lane these days, but there's a wide net that had been cast before us, and appreciating that and knowing our place in it and knowing our connection to it is certainly one of the things that has made this martial art so enjoyable to me. And